What if the oldest ruins on Earth aren't just ruins, but records of something humanity was never meant to remember? Carvings that match the stars, languages that appear fully formed, and technologies that vanish as soon as they appear. Every culture tells the same story: beings from the sky who came down, built, and left. And every time someone gets too close to proving it, the evidence disappears. Welcome to the 101 Archive. Tonight, we'll descend through 101 ancient alien cover-ups, buried by time, from temples aligned to constellations, to manuscripts sealed in Vatican vaults, to DNA sequences that whisper of visitors not from here. We'll move between myth and classified history, through deserts, jungles, and frozen continents, following the trail of what may be the oldest secret on Earth, that humanity might not be alone, and never was. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you enjoy mystery documentaries, don't forget to subscribe. Now, get comfortable, and let's start where the story first took shape, Göbekli Tepe, where the sky gods seem to awaken. You stand on the arid plateau of southeastern Turkey, wind tracing the same lines it has carved for 12,000 years. Beneath your feet lies Göbekli Tepe, an ancient mound that should not exist. In 1994, a Kurdish shepherd found a curved stone protruding from the dust. When archaeologist Klaus Schmidt arrived, he realized it was part of a circle of pillars so massive that conventional history began to buckle. Carbon dating placed the site around 9600 BCE, 7 millennia before Stonehenge, 5 before the pyramids. Scholars verified the dates repeatedly. There was no error. Humanity, still classed as hunter-gatherer, had carved and lifted monoliths weighing up to 12 tons. As you walk among the excavated rings, the stones themselves speak. Each pillar bears a relief: foxes, vultures, scorpions, cranes, etched with a precision so fine that microscopic studies show differential polishing, not crude hammering. Archaeologists confirm these were shaped with flint tools, yet the smoothness suggests something else, a method of abrasion beyond what flint alone could achieve. Some geologists propose sand polishing, others quietly admit the surface behaves as though exposed to short bursts of heat. That observation remains open to debate, but the texture is real, measured and published. Then comes the first undeniable alignment. The main enclosures, labelled D and C, are oriented toward the rising of Orion's belt and the bright star Sirius. Astrophysicist Giulio Maggioli recalculated the angles and confirmed they would have matched that constellation in 9600 BCE, long before the earliest recorded astronomy. Historians concede the alignment is genuine, though whether intentional is contested. For those who read the sky, it feels less like coincidence and more like memory. This is where mythology enters. In Mesopotamia, thousands of years later, stories speak of beings who came from the heavens and taught humankind agriculture and architecture. Schmidt himself dismissed such parallels. He saw only early priest-hunters gathering for ritual. Yet independent scholars noticed that Göbekli Tepe's animal motifs mirror constellations. Known millennia later, the scorpion for Scorpius, the crane for Cygnus, the fox for Lepus. The match is not perfect, but uncanny enough to haunt the literature. If the pillars mapped the sky, who taught their builders to chart it? Archaeology can describe what they did, not why. Every verified artifact on the site, flint blades, obsidian fragments, grinding stones, belongs to a society without writing, wheels, or pottery. And still they built architecture requiring hundreds of labourers, logistics, and a design plan. Anthropologists propose that faith itself was the technology, a unifying vision powerful enough to organise thousands. Others whisper that faith may have been sparked by contact with something these people could only call the sky gods. Later excavations added another riddle. Once each ring was completed, its builders deliberately buried it. Layer by layer, they filled their own temple with rubble from the surrounding hillside. Radiocarbon samples show this infilling was intentional, systematic and rapid. No sign of conquest or collapse, just an act of concealment. Schmidt described it as a time capsule sealed by those who made it. The act remains unique in prehistoric architecture. Why bury perfection? Mainstream interpretation suggests symbolic closure, the end of an era, yet to others it looks like a quarantine, a decision to hide something powerful or forbidden. The data cannot decide between them. What is certain is that the mound preserved the stones almost intact for 10,000 years until chance revealed them again. Night falls over the plateau, and you picture the original builders watching the same stars. Computer simulations show that in their epoch, the constellation Orion rose due east, precisely through the gap between the twin central pillars, each shaped like a stylized human. One faces the dawn, the other the setting sun. On their flanks are belts and folded hands, suggesting deities or ancestors, whether gods, heroes, or symbolic men. They stand forever watching the heavens they may have charted. In academic journals, no mention appears of extraterrestrial visitors. Archaeology works from the ground up, not the sky down. Yet the human imagination keeps returning here, drawn by patterns that feel deliberate. The idea of teachers from the stars predates any modern conspiracy. It is carved into myths from the Andes to Sumer. The similarity could be psychological, cultures gazing upward, projecting divinity onto the cosmos, or it could hint at an origin story we still refuse to face. Even the material science adds friction. Portable XRF analysis reveals traces of arsenic and copper in some tools found nearby, metals usually associated with later periods. The finding is verified but unexplained, either an unknown early smelting process or contamination from deeper strata. Whatever the answer, the result forced archaeologists to rewrite the timeline of metallurgy once again. And then the pattern. Within a single generation after Göbekli Tepe was sealed, settlements appeared along the Fertile Crescent, Chayanu, Nevalachuri, Jef el Ahmar, each echoing its concentric plan on a smaller scale. It is as if knowledge radiated outward from the buried site, like a signal sparking the birth of civilization itself. Anthropologists call this the Neolithic Revolution, but in this corner of Anatolia it feels less like invention and more like inheritance. Schmidt's notes reveal a moment of private awe. He wrote, "This place is older than myth itself. Whoever built it already understood the heavens." He never speculated further, yet his final words carry the weight of unanswered questions. We always thought agriculture led to temples. Here, the temple led to agriculture. That reversal, faith before food, architecture before cities, upends everything we believed about human progress, and it sets the pattern that this archive will trace again and again, monumental knowledge, appearing fully formed, then vanishing as if erased. The wind thickens with sand, and you imagine the last builders walking away, their work entombed beneath them. Maybe they feared what they had touched. Maybe they obeyed. Or maybe they knew that someday the stones would rise again when we were ready, or curious enough to uncover them. Either way, the pattern begins here, creation, followed by concealment. From this hill of forgotten pillars, every later mystery draws its outline. And that alignment, the one pointing to Orion, does more than mark the stars. It points east, toward a land where clay tablets will soon speak of gods descending in fire and gold. Because when the dust of Göbekli Tepe settles, the next voice that rises belongs to Sumer. The cradle of civilization rests between the Tigris and Euphrates, where dust hides the first written memory of humankind. When you picture Sumer, you see mud brick cities, reed boats and tablets pressed with wedges of clay, tiny marks that became humanity's first library. Yet inside that library lie words so old and so strange that they still unsettle the timeline. Archaeologists first unearthed the tablets in the mid-1800s at Nineveh and Nippur. They were baked by accident in ancient fires and thus preserved for 5,000 years. When George Smith, a self-taught linguist at the British Museum, began reading them in 1872, he reportedly jumped from his chair and ran through the halls shouting, "I have found the flood." The story etched in cuneiform matched the book of Genesis line for line, long before Genesis itself was written. That is verified fact. It changed how scholars understood scripture and history alike. The Sumerians called their gods Anunnaki, the princely offspring of An. They were said to descend in shining craft and fashion humankind to serve them. In the clay, those words are literal. They came down from the sky. Most historians read this as metaphor, a poetic way to speak of storm and fertility, but the image is unmistakably vertical. Beings above, men below. The tablets describe metals unknown to the plane of Shinar, temples that touched the heavens, and gifts of knowledge that appear without prelude. Writing, irrigation, law. Where did such complexity ignite so quickly? Linguists verify that these myths, the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, date from the 3rd millennium BCE. They are older than the pyramids, older than any other coherent cosmology. Within them, the creation of man is portrayed not as miracle, but as engineering, clay mixed with the essence of the gods to create a servant race. To modern readers, it sounds like alchemy, or even genetics. To the Sumerians, it was simply truth delivered by divine hands. In 1976, a linguist named Zecharia Sitchin revisited these translations and proposed a new reading. He claimed the word Anunnaki referred not to gods, but to travelers from a 12th planet called Nibiru. According to his theory, these visitors mined gold, modified early humans, and departed, leaving temples as coded beacons. No mainstream Assyriologist agrees. Philologists confirm that Sitchin rearranged syllables and context. Yet his interpretations persist because the raw data, the ancient words themselves, remain ambiguous enough to invite wonder. That tension between clay and conjecture fuels the entire mystery. Take the tablet now known as VA243, stored in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin. It shows a seated figure before a cluster of stars, 11 dots encircling one large central sphere. Sitchin saw a solar system, complete with a hidden 12th body. Conventional scholars call it a decorative rosette, common in Mesopotamian art. Both views are published, one verifiable, one speculative. Yet even the cautious admit that Sumerian astronomy was advanced. Their priests mapped Venus's 584-day cycle and could predict eclipses centuries before Greece. How a Neolithic society gained that knowledge is the unanswered question that keeps resurfacing. Another tablet, the Sumerian King List, lists rulers who reigned not for decades, but for thousands of years. Elulim ruled 28,800 years, El-Aljar 36,000. Historians categorize these numbers as mythic exaggeration, yet the list abruptly shifts to realistic spans after a great flood, as if two epochs were stitched together, one divine, one mortal. What matters is not the arithmetic, but the pattern, a tradition of beings descending from heaven, then a flood, then humankind restarting from survivors who knew the old ways. Archaeology confirms a regional flood layer near Urus and Shuruppak around 2900 BCE. Fact and legend overlap like twin inscriptions on the same stone. Even metallurgy bends the record. In Uruk's deepest layers, scientists found copper traces centuries earlier than copper should exist. Peer-reviewed journals record the anomaly. No one can yet explain it. Perhaps trade, perhaps contamination. Yet it fits the myths that speak of the gods bringing fire of heaven to smelt the earth. Whenever data and story converge, the boundary between them blurs. You trace your fingers over the wedge-shaped script. Each stroke was pressed by a human hand that believed these lines recorded history, not allegory. Through translation, that conviction still pulses. The ancients wrote of skyboats, of kings ascending to join their makers, of stars that govern destiny. Scholars interpret those as celestial metaphors, the language of early astronomy. But if they are metaphors, They are remarkably consistent ones, repeated in every city-state from Eridu to Lagash. Why the same imagery everywhere, and why always up? The tablet's survival is itself a miracle of concealment. Many were found reused as fill inside later buildings, their stories literally buried within walls. Others were hidden in temple archives sealed under clay. Historians call it bureaucratic storage. Others sense deliberate protection, as if certain knowledge were preserved for a future age capable of reading it. When those tablets emerged into modern light, the stories they carried unsettled both theology and science, two worlds rarely in agreement, suddenly sharing disquiet. Today you can stand before them in museum glass, small cracked squares of clay. Each line begins with the word when the heavens above had not been named, when the earth below had not been called by name. It is not history as we write it, but memory recited by a civilization convinced it was remembering something real. That belief, carved into wet clay and hardened by fire, became the foundation of human thought. It also became the first mystery the modern world tried to bury beneath translation. If you listen closely, the tablets are not silent. They whisper about teachers who arrived, gave the gift of language, and vanished into the sky. They whisper of floods that reset the clock of mankind, and they whisper of a compact between gods and humans, a promise that knowledge would always return. From this soil-baked archive arose every later myth of celestial visitors, every holy text that begins with creation from above. Whether one sees gods or allegory, the fact remains, our oldest records begin not with ourselves, but with someone else. And as the stylus lifted from the final line, a new phase of secrecy began, because once humans learned to write, they also learned to hide what was written. The next tablets to speak would belong to empires of stone, Egypt and the Americas, whose monuments echo the same constellations. Their builders would carve blueprints so precise that even now engineers struggle to explain them. The story of the Sky Gods was far from over. It had only changed its medium from clay to stone, from words to walls, and the trail it leaves leads directly to the next question in this archive. If civilizations, oceans apart, built the same designs, who taught them the plan? The story carved in clay spreads outward, hardening into mountains of limestone and granite. You travel west from Mesopotamia, and suddenly the horizon is ruled by geometry, the pyramids of Giza standing, as if the desert itself agreed to obey a compass. Every survey since Petrie's in 1880 confirms the same impossible precision. The Great Pyramid's base deviates from true north by less than 3 arc minutes. Its sides differ in length by just over 2 centimeters. For ancient builders with copper tools and no wheels, this perfection should not exist, yet it does. Measured again by laser in 2000, archaeologists describe the achievement as the product of generations of trial, error, and mathematics encoded in rope and shadow. But even those who defend a human explanation still whisper their admiration. The structure behaves like a machine. Its internal passages form right angles so tight that modern engineers struggle to pass instruments through them. When physicists from Tokyo University scanned the pyramid with cosmic ray muons in 2017, they found a hidden void nearly 30 meters long. What it contains remains unverified. Excavation is forbidden, yet the discovery proves that the monument still guards secrets unseen by history. Across the ocean at Teotihuacan, Mexican archaeologists charted another geometric masterpiece. The Avenue of the Dead runs exactly 15.5 degrees east of north, matching the summer solstice sunrise. The pyramids of the Sun and Moon mirror the relative sizes of Earth and Moon within 2% accuracy. There is no evidence of contact with Egypt, but the math echoes across time. And when you overlay the maps of Giza and Teotihuacan, both complexes align to Orion's belt, the same constellation that governed Göbekli Tepe. Coincidence, perhaps? Yet coincidences repeated become patterns, and patterns invite questions. In Peru, high above the sacred valley, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman coils like a serpent around Cusco. Each stone weighs up to 300 tons, carved with interlocking faces that fit so tightly a blade cannot slip between them. Archaeologists confirm no mortar was used. Petrographic studies show surfaces polished with hematite and sand, not melted, yet the visual illusion of soft, moulded rock remains. Some engineers propose wooden levers and rope. Others suggest clay lubrication. None have replicated it at that scale. What is verified is that the angles are not random. The polygonal joints distribute seismic stress, letting the walls survive earthquakes that shattered later colonial buildings. Science can explain function, but not origin. How did pre-Columbian masons invent a technique only rediscovered by modern architecture? At Ollantaytambo, 10 monoliths of rose rhyolite stand half-carved, half-transported. They lie abandoned on a mountainside, as if a project stopped mid-command. Local legend says the gods ordered silence. Geologists note the quarry sits across a river gorge. Moving such masses without wheels would have required thousands of labourers hauling on braided fibre. Traces of ramps remain, yet the angle of ascent defies traction studies. In that unresolved physics, the imagination finds space for mystery. When you set these sites beside one another, Egypt, Mexico, Peru, certain constants emerge: orientation to cardinal points, geometry based on the golden ratio, alignments with Orion and Sirius. These are verified measurements. Whether those alignments were intentional or symbolic remains debated, but their recurrence is factual. Civilizations divided by oceans and millennia turned their eyes to the same stars and carved their reverence into stone. Was it parallel evolution or inherited design? In 2005, physicist Giulio Maggi described these patterns as sacred engineering, a global impulse to mirror heaven on earth. He stops short of cosmic architects, yet the phrase itself carries weight: mirror heaven on earth. Every ancient builder seemed to chase that reflection, the belief that order in the sky could impose order on the ground. If that belief began at Göbekli Tepe, then its transmission across continents would suggest a cultural memory far older than writing. Beneath the romantic speculation lies another, quieter truth. Many of these monuments share a hidden arithmetic, the constant known as 43,200. Scale the Earth's circumference by that number, and the Great Pyramid's height represents the planet's radius within less than 1%. Modern mathematics verifies the correlation. Coincidence again, or intuition? Historians argue that human beings are drawn to simple ratios, but the number appears again in Vedic cosmology, Norse myth, and Mayan calendrics. Different worlds, same rhythm. Whether by chance or communication, it speaks of a shared geometry, encoded in the human mind. Magnetic anomalies add another layer. In both Egypt and Peru, magnetometer readings fluctuate around major megaliths, possibly from magnetite veins in the rock. The data are verified, the interpretation is not. To some these fields are natural, to others they are remnants of forgotten experiments in resonance. Acoustic tests in the Great Pyramid and at Chavin de Huantar in the Andes reveal low-frequency vibrations between 110 and 120 Hz, the range that interacts with human heartbeat. Archaeologists consider it ritual design, a way to induce trance during ceremony. Whatever the purpose, the effect is measurable and real. Ancient builders understood not only mass and light, but also sound. Step back far enough, and the monuments form a global circuit of stone, each one tuned to the same celestial frequencies. Whether connected by trade, myth, or coincidence, they all tell the same silent story: humanity reaching upward, building memories that refuse to erode. And just as often, those memories are buried again, temples entombed beneath later cities, blueprints erased by rulers who feared what they represented. The pattern of construction and concealment repeats. Today, archaeologists continue to uncover foundations beneath foundations, older pyramids beneath newer ones, previous temples under later shrines. In Mexico, radar mapping beneath the Pyramid of the Moon revealed liquid mercury pools arranged as cosmic rivers. In Egypt, a tunnel beneath the Sphinx remains sealed by official order. Each new discovery seems to open and close itself simultaneously, a revelation immediately contained. We realize that these monuments are not simply architecture. They are archives, libraries built in limestone, storing mathematics, astronomy, and faith in physical form. They survived floods, earthquakes, and empires. They speak a language older than writing, proportion, and their grammar appears universal. The stones do not lie. They stand where the builders placed them, aligned with stars that still burn above our heads. Whether those builders shared a master plan or merely a human instinct for symmetry may never be proven, but the evidence remains carved into the planet. Every coordinate, every alignment, every echo of Orion and Sirius is measurable, real, and verified. What those measurements mean is what fuels the mystery. When night settles over Giza, the pyramids fall silent, yet their shadows trace a map that reaches far beyond Egypt. That map will lead, inevitably, to questions of who controlled such knowledge, who preserved it, and who decided what the world was allowed to remember. And in the centuries that followed, the guardians of that memory would not be masons or astronomers, but priests. In hidden chambers beneath a different empire, ink would replace stone, and silence would become policy. The trail of geometry ends at the door of the Vatican. Behind it waits the next vault in this archive. The trail of stone leads to paper, and the whisper of chisels becomes the rustle of parchment. For more than 4 centuries, the world's most guarded archive has hidden beneath the cobblestones of Rome. Its proper name is not secret, but apostolic, yet the Latin secretum once meant private, not forbidden. Still, the word fits. Few doors on earth carry heavier symbolism than the iron gates of the Vatican Apostolic Archive. In 1612, Pope Paul V ordered all documents belonging to the Holy See gathered into one repository. Today, its climate-controlled vaults stretch more than 85 kilometers of shelving. Birth records, state treaties, letters from kings, scientists and saints. Each is catalogued, bound, and preserved under a steady 20 degrees Celsius. Only accredited researchers may enter, and only by appointment. Requests must specify the exact folder and year. Those who have worked there describe silence so absolute that even footsteps are absorbed by the marble. Much of what lies inside is perfectly ordinary: papal bulls, diplomatic correspondence, receipts for candles and ink. Yet, scattered among the mundane are manuscripts that once shook empires. Galileo's trial transcripts, locked for centuries, reveal how theology wrestled with a moving universe. Letters from Copernicus survived long enough to become vindication. Historians confirm that access to such material was restricted until the late 19th century, not for conspiracy, but for control. The Church guarded its narrative of the heavens as carefully as its relics of the earth. Still, rumours persist of a deeper silence. Within the archive's labyrinth, there are sealed collections, diplomatic dossiers unopened for 75 years, papal correspondence with monarchs still classified. Some historians believe entire medieval libraries remain unprocessed in wooden crates from World War II. Others claim documents describing fiery wheels or heavenly visitors were catalogued, then withheld. No evidence verifies those stories, but the absence of proof has a gravity of its own. Where knowledge is locked away, imagination rushes in. In 1998, the Vatican created a separate department for its observatories, Castel Gandolfo in Italy and Mount Graham in Arizona. Run by Jesuit astronomers, these observatories study galaxies, exoplanets, and cosmic evolution. Their existence surprises those who imagine faith opposed to science. The Jesuits publish in peer-reviewed journals. They discover supernovae and analyze meteorites from Mars. Yet the juxtaposition of starlight and secrecy fuels endless speculation. What might the Church have seen that made it guard the heavens so closely? Historians trace the tension back to the 17th century, when Giordano Bruno envisioned an infinite cosmos filled with countless suns and worlds. His execution in 1600 remains a wound between reason and belief. The official record cites heresy, not astronomy, but the association endures, a warning that some knowledge was once lethal to possess. In that shadow, the archive became both library and tomb. Among its documented treasures are manuscripts of the Chronicles of Nuremberg, medieval reports of flaming globes and luminous wheels. Such phrases fascinated 20th century translators who saw in them precursors to modern UFO accounts. Most scholars consider the imagery symbolic, representations of divine power. Not machines, but the descriptions remain vivid enough to blur the line. A 13th century chronicle by Gervase of Tilbury, for example, speaks of a shining ship seen above England. The Vatican preserves copies, but none marked as forbidden. What gives them mystique is not classification, but context. The Church has always mediated between heaven and earth. When it records a miracle, skeptics read technology, and both sides see what they need to see. Inside the archive, climate sensors monitor humidity to the decimal. Each shelf smells faintly of dust and ink. Each document is a fossil of human thought. To read here is to understand how history survives, not only through what is revealed, but through what is delayed. The Church's rhythm of disclosure is measured in centuries. Documents concerning the Holocaust were opened only in 2020. Files from the papacy of Pius XII remain under study. Even transparency follows divine timing. And yet, despite all modern openness, one section remains beyond scholars' reach: the private papal correspondence, labelled Pontificia. Only the reigning pope and a handful of archivists may read it. Its contents are unknown, perhaps mere administration, perhaps more. Every speculation about ancient secrets funnels toward that sealed door. Theories range from early accounts of unidentified celestial phenomena to lost gospels describing other worlds. None are proven, but the setting, underground, timeless, inviolable, makes belief easy. What is certain is that the Vatican has always acted as the ultimate conservator of human memory. Its archivists rescue and restore texts others might destroy. Within those walls rest Babylonian tablets, Egyptian papyri, Chinese scrolls, echoes of the very civilizations that carved our first mysteries. If there is a conspiracy, it may simply be the oldest one, to preserve knowledge so completely that it ceases to belong to the living. Late at night, the halls of the Apostolic Archive glow with cold fluorescent light. Somewhere below, dehumidifiers hum like distant organs. You imagine shelves upon shelves of sealed boxes, each marked only by a number. Inside could be anything, the mundane or the miraculous. The power lies not in what is written, but in who decides when it may be read. And that control, exercised over centuries, shaped the modern world's understanding of its past. When evidence challenges doctrine, doctrine waits. When truth threatens order, order delays. It is not malice, but management, a bureaucracy of faith, guarding the narrative of heaven. Outside, the bells of St. Peter's echo across the city. They sound ordinary, yet each peal carries the memory of an age when knowledge itself was a form of fire. Behind those gates, the embers still glow, quietly, continuously, waiting for permission to burn again. From these vaults of silence, the path of secrecy turns outward once more. Beyond Rome, far from archives and parchment, other forms of evidence will surface, not in libraries, but in bone and blood. Skulls with alien geometry, genomes with missing pages. The next mystery belongs to the body itself. The desert wind changes as you leave Rome behind. It carries not parchment dust, but sand and the whisper of bone. On the cliffs of southern Peru, high above the Pacific, the necropolis of Paracas opens like a honeycomb of tombs. When archaeologist Julio Tello uncovered it in 1928, he found dozens of skulls, unlike any he had seen, long sloping craniums that seemed to stretch toward the horizon. Even under the unrelenting sun they gleamed with the polish of centuries. At first glance, the skulls looked alien. The forehead high, the vault elongated, the base narrow. The locals called them cone heads and said they belonged to ancient nobles. Anthropologists would later confirm that the shape was not natural but cultural, a practice of cranial modification that bound infants' heads with cloth and wood to mark status. X-rays revealed normal cranial sutures, normal brain cavities, just shifted anatomy. The practice existed not only in Peru, but across the world, among the Maya, the Huns, and even in Neolithic France. Its global recurrence remains one of anthropology's small mysteries. Different peoples, no contact, yet the same aesthetic of stretching the human silhouette toward the sky. In 2014, a private genetic study tested several Paracas specimens. The goal was legitimate, to learn whether the people buried here were a distinct lineage within the Andes. The results, later re-examined by Peruvian scientists, found traces of haplogroups common in the coastal region and nothing outside known human variation. No unknown DNA, no non-human sequence, just a reminder that ancient populations were as diverse as the lands they ruled. Still, headlines twisted the findings into something stranger. In the vacuum between data and interpretation, imagination filled the gap. That pattern, discovery, distortion, legend, repeats throughout the history of science. In the 19th century, American newspapers brimmed with reports of giant skeletons found in burial mounds. Many of those finds were real human remains measured with inconsistent methods. Others were exaggerations by local collectors. The Smithsonian Institution did receive and catalogue some of them, but most were reburied, according to new laws protecting indigenous sites. When early inventories disappeared from public record, a myth was born that a government agency had hidden bones of a vanished race. In truth, the only burial erased was that of careless reporting. Yet the legend survived because every missing record feels like a secret. Modern genetics replaced spades with sequencers, but the sense of hidden history endured. In 2010, researchers mapping the Neanderthal genome found traces of their DNA in modern humans, proof that we were never alone. 2 years later, another genome emerged from a finger bone in Siberia's Denisova cave, belonging to a species no one had seen before. That fragment added an entire branch to the human family tree, and it changed anthropology overnight. Across the world, indigenous communities began to ask, if more ancestors remain undiscovered, what else lies in the soil, waiting to revise identity itself? The ethical weight of those questions brought a new kind of secrecy. Museums closed access to remains, laboratories restricted data, not from conspiracy but respect. Each bone carries ownership, each gene a living descendant. Still to the public, those closed doors looked familiar, another archive, another vault of silence. What began as scientific caution became fuel for new cover-up stories. If you walk today through the Museo Regional de Ica, the Paracas skulls rest in glass cases, softly lit. The bones are thin from desert desiccation. Their profiles are graceful, almost architectural. They no longer whisper of visitors from the stars, but of an ancient people who reshaped themselves to resemble what they worshipped. Perhaps they sought beauty, perhaps connection, a way to turn the human head into a mirror of the heavens. In that symbolic gesture lies the real mystery, not alien biology, but human aspiration. Meanwhile, in genetic archives far from the desert, new data continues to blur boundaries. Genome projects have traced migrations across millennia, showing that every population on Earth carries echoes of others, an unbroken chain of exchange and adaptation. No single lineage is pure, no ancestry complete. To scientists, this mosaic is proof of unity. To storytellers, it looks like a cipher left by forgotten architects. Both views hold a kind of truth, one measurable, the other emotional. Back in the Andean dust, archaeologists still unearth Paracas textiles dyed in colours that resist time. Their patterns repeat spirals, stars, and human figures crowned with radiant lines. Some see halos, others sunbursts, others the shape of the elongated skull itself, a cultural feedback loop between art and anatomy. The people who made these fabrics may never have seen the constellations of Orion or Sirius, yet their motifs reach upward all the same. It is as if the impulse to stretch the body, the mind, and the sky belong to the same unspoken equation. In this light, the so-called forbidden evidence reveals something simpler and more profound. Not that humans are the descendants of another species, but that we have always tried to become something greater than ourselves. From clay tablets to bone, from temple stone to genetic code, we leave signals that future ages will struggle to interpret. Each discovery reopens the oldest question of all: where do we truly come from? And each attempt to answer it generates both knowledge and fear. Science moves forward by exposure, culture survives by secrecy. Between them lies the corridor where myths are born. And somewhere within that corridor, a tribe in West Africa will soon chart a star invisible to the naked eye. Their story will twist the same thread of heaven and earth, knowledge and doubt. It is there that the next clue waits, etched not in bone, but in memory, passed by voice, the messengers of the Dogon. The sandstone cliffs of Bandiagra rise from the Sahel like a broken wall against the sky. Carved into them are caves, ladders, and painted shrines that have watched the same stars for 1,000 years. Here live the Dogon, a people whose rituals link earth and heaven so closely that time itself seems to revolve around their calendar. When French anthropologist Marcel Griaule began his fieldwork in the 1930s, he found a culture already old beyond record. Their ceremonies, he wrote, traced the rhythm of Sirius, the brightest star in the night. Every 60 years they held the Sigui festival, timed to what elders called the return of the invisible star. In 1862, European astronomers had only just discovered that Sirius had a faint companion, Sirius B, orbiting once every 50 years. How could a remote West African people know of it? Griaule took meticulous notes, recording drawings of spirals, ellipses, and twin stars. He concluded that the Dogon had preserved a memory of something ancient, perhaps passed from Egypt through forgotten channels. His reports were published, verified as genuine ethnography, and immediately questioned. Later researchers returned to Mali and found the same ceremonies, but different interpretations. Some Dogon denied ever speaking of an invisible star. Others said missionaries had told them of it decades earlier. Linguists studying the word Potolo, often translated as Sirius B, found it literally meant the seed star, a symbol of creation rather than an astronomical. In Dogon cosmology, the universe begins with a grain that spins, bursting into life, a mythic parallel to the scientific Big Bang. Whether coincidence or transmission, The resemblance kept the story alive. Their art reinforces that sense of cosmic scale. Masks carved for the Sigui festival stretch upward 2, 3, sometimes 5 meters high, towering above the dancers who wear them. Each represents a stage in the journey from the primal seed to the sky, human to celestial. When the dance ends, the masks are laid in caves facing east, the direction of Sirius at dawn. That orientation is verified by survey. It's part of a precise geography of belief. Riol's collaborator, Germaine de Tolan, continued the work for decades. She mapped Dogon temples and noted that many align with solstices and the Milky Way's arc. She never claimed extraterrestrial contact. She saw in their astronomy a metaphor for order, a way to keep the seasons and the soul synchronized. Yet her publications reached a world already hungry for cosmic origin stories. In the 1970s, writers turned her field notes into evidence of visitors from the stars, asserting that the Dogon could not have known the orbital period of Sirius B without telescopes. Astronomers countered that such numbers never appear in the original transcripts. Still, the myth took root, and with it a new form of fame the Dogon never asked for. Beneath the speculation lies a verified wonder, their knowledge of the sky as a living clock. They track Venus's appearances with a precision equal to medieval European observatories. They time agriculture to the rising of specific constellations, and navigate the desert by the motion of stars that vanish each rainy season. Their calendar interlocks lunar, solar, and stellar cycles into a single pulse of 60 years, each renewal marked by dances, funerals, and rebirth. It is a cosmology written in song instead of stone. When modern astronomers visited Bandiagra with telescopes, the Dogon elders watched silently, then smiled. To them, instruments were merely another mask, a way for outsiders to see what ritual had always revealed. They explained that every human being carries an invisible twin, just as every star carries a companion. Science might call it metaphor. To them it was symmetry, the principle that holds the universe together. The physical evidence supports at least part of their story. Excavations around Dogon villages reveal trade goods from Egypt and the Mediterranean: beads, bronze, salt. Cultural exchange is not myth. Ideas can travel as easily as metal, carried by traders and pilgrims along the Niger. It's possible that knowledge of Sirius filtered south centuries ago and became absorbed into a symbolic system already rich with celestial imagery. But that explanation, tidy as it sounds, cannot erase the haunting precision of their rituals. When the Sigui drums begin, the rhythm matches the period of the star's orbit almost exactly. Coincidence, or inherited science, turned into prayer? The answer depends on how you define knowledge. In the 21st century, Dogon astronomers themselves study Sirius with digital equipment provided by universities. They confirm what Western science already knew, but they also reinterpret it through their own tradition. The seed star still spins, creation still renews. Riol's notebooks, once controversial, now rest in Paris, fragile pages filled with drawings of twin spirals. Scholars still debate whether he misunderstood or glimpsed a deeper continuity between observation and myth. Standing on the cliff at dusk, you watch the first star appear. It is bright, unwavering, ancient. Sirius A, followed invisibly by its white dwarf companion. For the Dogon, that second star represents the hidden source of all life, proof that what is unseen shapes what is visible. In that belief lies a truth, both scientific and spiritual. The universe is built on forces we can measure but rarely comprehend. And as the drums fade, another sound rises, the whir of engines, the language of secrecy reborn in modern form. For in the century after Griot, exploration would shift from ritual to reconnaissance. Governments would chase the same mysteries, once guarded by priests, but with satellites instead of songs. The search for origins would become classified. From the silence of the Sahel, the trail now turns toward laboratories, desert test ranges, and sealed reports, stamped with acronyms. The next guardians of hidden knowledge will not wear masks or robes, but uniforms. Their archives will not be carved in rock, but encrypted on paper, marked top secret. The century of exploration turned into the century of surveillance. What began as a search for origins became a race for information, satellites replacing shovels, intelligence agencies inheriting the world once mapped by explorers. By the early 1950s, archaeology and espionage had become uneasy allies, joined by the same obsession, the ability to see what others could not. When the CIA was founded in 1947, it inherited not just spies, but scientists, linguists, geographers, cryptographers. Among them were men and women who had once dug in deserts, sketched ruins, traced caravan routes. The agency's early aerial reconnaissance programs relied on those skills, understanding terrain, interpreting shadows, predicting what lay beneath. In declassified documents, historians have traced operations where archaeologists advised pilots on how to photograph the ground for both heritage and defense. Project Corona, launched in the 1960s, produced thousands of high-resolution satellite images. Years later, those same images would help scholars locate ancient irrigation canals, lost cities, and forgotten roads. The data were military, but the discoveries were human. The border between secrecy and science blurred even further during the Cold War. At Langley and Fort Meade, the CIA funded experiments in what it called non-local perception. The projects bore names like Stargate and Sunstreak. Participants attempted to visualize distant sites through concentration, producing sketches of temples and landscapes they had never visited. Official evaluations called the results inconsistent, but enough curiosity surfaced to keep funding alive for 2 decades. When those files were declassified in the 1990s, journalists pored over drawings of pyramids and artifacts labelled possible archaeological structures. The public read wonder, analysts read coincidence. Still, the idea of intelligence officers peering into antiquity without leaving a room gave birth to new legends, the CIA as the last secret order of explorer priests. In truth, the agency's relationship with archaeology was often pragmatic. In Egypt and Iraq, US embassies quietly consulted local excavators to map ancient ruins before infrastructure projects erased them. Cultural knowledge was soft power. To understand a region's history was to predict its loyalties. Scholars were offered grants through intermediary foundations. Their field reports sometimes returned. Most of it was routine. Budget lines in the grey zone, where curiosity meets strategy. But secrecy once applied transforms the ordinary into myth. In 1972, aerial photographs from a classified satellite revealed a pattern of mounds in Syria's Habur Basin. Archaeologists, given access decades later, recognized the footprint of a Bronze Age city larger than anything known in the region. The discovery became Tel Brak, one of the oldest urban centers on Earth. It was intelligence technology, repurposed for history. The satellites had been built to locate missile silos. Instead, they mapped the birth of civilization. No aliens, no cover-up, just the unintended poetry of machines. Yet even genuine cooperation fed suspicion. Each time the CIA released a batch of imagery, entire years were missing, frames redacted. Some gaps were routine, blurred for national security, but others corresponded to archaeological zones. In those absences, imagination took root. Writers began linking vanished photos to myths of buried aircraft, strange alloys, or desert sites too dangerous to reveal. The truth was simpler and perhaps stranger. History and intelligence had become twin mirrors, each reflecting what the other chose to hide. By the late 1970s, a handful of archaeologists who had served in intelligence during World War II still held senior positions in museums. Their wartime skills survey, logistics, encryption had translated into peaceful excavation, but in private letters they admitted the temptation of secrecy never fully faded. To unearth the past is to handle information that can reorder belief, and belief has always been a strategic asset. Empires once rose by controlling relics. Now nations did it by controlling narratives. One declassified memo from 1957 mentions artifacts of non-terrestrial alloy collected during atomic tests in Nevada. Historians reviewing the file later noted the phrase referred to meteorite fragments, ordinary cosmic debris, mistaken for something exotic. But the wording lingered, copied, distorted, amplified by decades of retelling. From such phrases, entire mythologies are born. A slip of terminology becomes a spark, and suddenly intelligence work shades into legend. Secret archaeologists, hidden relics, truth fenced behind red tape. What remains verifiable is the archive itself. The CIA's CREST database now holds thousands of pages on ancient sites, cultural diplomacy, and satellite mapping. Scholars use it daily. It proves that curiosity survived bureaucracy, that even the cold calculus of intelligence could not extinguish the warmth of wonder. Agents, it seems, are as human as archaeologists. They too want to know who built the first walls, who looked at the stars, who wrote the first name in clay. In recent years, cooperation between intelligence imagery and archaeology has become official. The US and other governments now release declassified satellite data for heritage protection, tracking looting and destruction. What began as espionage ends as preservation. Technology designed to guard borders now guards memory. But the mythology seeded by secrecy refuses to die. Every black rectangle on a declassified page, every blurred coordinate becomes an invitation. What did they see that we cannot? What lies in the footage, still classified? The answer may be nothing more dramatic than an empty desert, but the question itself fuels our fascination. Because once a map bears the mark, restricted, the human mind fills the blank with mystery. Standing at a modern control room, you watch satellites sweep the same skies once charted by priests and astronomers. The tools have changed, the impulse has not. To know the unseen is still power. And somewhere above the Andes, a camera lens captures a pattern on the desert floor, lines so vast they seem designed for eyes not bound to Earth. Their rediscovery will spark new arguments, new secrecy, new awe. The next chapter of this archive unfolds there, where stone meets horizon and geometry becomes a message to the gods. The desert is silent, but the sky is listening. From the air, the Peruvian desert looks like parchment scorched by the sun. Then the light shifts, and the ground resolves into geometry. Lines that run arrow straight for kilometers, trapezoids, spirals, and figures so vast that only from the sky can you see their design. A hummingbird spreads its wings across 300 feet of sand. A monkey curls in a perfect spiral. A spider stretches its legs to the horizon. These are the Nazca lines, messages written in dust, preserved by nothing more than wind and dryness. They were first noticed from above in the 1920s, when pilots ferrying mail between Lima and Arequipa looked down and thought they saw ancient runways. That comparison would shape every mystery to come. But long before flight, the lines had already endured 15 centuries, drawn between 500 Archaeologists confirm the method. Workers scraped away the dark, oxidized stones of the desert surface to reveal the pale gypsum beneath. No machinery, no metal tools, just ropes, stakes, and mathematics. In a place where rain almost never falls, the marks have lasted longer than any paint. Paul Kosok, an American historian, surveyed the plateau in 1941 and called it the world's largest astronomy book. He noticed that one long line pointed precisely to the sunset of the winter solstice. His student Maria Reicke, a mathematician from Germany, devoted the rest of her life to measuring and preserving the site. She mapped hundreds of figures, verified their orientations, and argued that the Nazca were sky watchers who used the desert as a calendar. Her meticulous charts are still used today. Not all alignments match celestial events, but some do so with unnerving precision. At least 40 lines correspond to solstice points, and several triangles track the rising of bright stars, like Sirius and Alcyone. Other researchers see a different logic. Archaeologist Johann Reinhard compared the lines with nearby ceremonial mounds and found that most radiate from water sources. In a desert where survival depended on hidden aquifers, mapping the flow of life itself would have been a sacred act. Ceramics from Nazca tombs depict ritual processions, suggesting the lines were walked, not seen, a choreography for gods who watched from above. The airstrip appearance, then, may be coincidence, flattened paths for prayers, not for machines. Yet the sense of scale resists easy explanation. Some lines run for 10 kilometers without deviating more than a few inches. From ground level they are invisible, the work of people who could never see their own creation in full. Why build something only the heavens could view? For centuries the question stayed unanswered, feeding the image of communication between Earth and sky. In 2019, Japanese scientists used drones and AI imaging to reveal 143 new geoglyphs, including humanoid figures and animals unseen for millennia. Infrared scans showed that many smaller drawings lie on slopes, visible from nearby ridges rather than the air. It appears the Nazca combined viewpoints, some local, some celestial, creating a network of symbols meant for both participants and deities. No alien engines required, just extraordinary intention. Standing on the desert plateau, you feel the stillness that keeps these lines intact. The sun burns, the wind barely moves, and the landscape becomes a mirror of the sky. Grains of sand glitter like stars. Every step risks erasing history. Maria Reicke spent decades walking here alone, sweeping debris from the lines with a household broom. Locals called her the Lady of the Lines. When asked what they meant, she would smile and say, "It is a message of harmony between man and the cosmos." She died in 1998, buried within sight of the figures she protected. The Nazca's achievement is measurable fact: 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and more than 70 animal and plant designs across 500 square kilometers. No engines, no metal, no modern surveying instruments, just the will to map eternity onto sand. Their technique was so precise that modern engineers who recreated it using only ropes reproduced the figures at full scale with almost no error. Whatever the motive, astronomy, water, or ritual, the builders understood geometry at a level once thought impossible for pre-Incan cultures. Still, the aura of secrecy lingers. Early in the Cold War, when aerial photography of Peru expanded, entire rolls of film went missing from archives. Officials said they were lost in transit. Conspiracy writers called it censorship. The truth was banal: paperwork, bureaucracy, decay. But the pattern, the idea of vanished evidence, fit too perfectly into the growing mythology of hidden knowledge. The Nazca lines became another cipher in the chain that stretches from Göbekli Tepe to Giza, monuments too vast too perfect, too silent to explain. When dusk falls, the plateau glows orange. From the hills, the hummingbird's wing catches the last light, pointing east. That direction leads across the Atlantic, toward another desert where sand covers secrets of its own. In Egypt, tunnels beneath the Sphinx and corridors within the pyramids wait behind locked gates. There too, discovery and disappearance walk hand in hand. The Nazca left no written word, only geometry. But their message endures. To reach the divine, one must first draw the path. And sometimes, to keep a mystery alive, you leave it large enough for the sky to read. The desert at Giza does not whisper, it hums. Wine sweeps along the plateau, turning grains of sand into static that crackles against the limestone. Here stand the last of the seven wonders, monuments so familiar that they seem to have nothing left to hide. Yet beneath their perfect symmetry, something still waits. At dawn, the Sphinx faces the rising sun, as it has for 45 centuries. Tourists see only stone, but for archaeologists, the ground below is alive with echoes. Since the 1970s, teams have used seismic surveys, radar, and muon imaging to map the bedrock under the monument. Every decade brings a new hint, an unexplained cavity here, a low-density zone there. In 1991, a geophysical study by Florida State University and Egypt's Antiquities Organization detected two rectangular voids beneath the Sphinx's pores. The results were published, peer-reviewed, and quickly withdrawn from the press until further verification. When headlines called it a cover-up, officials called it protocol. Even truth in archaeology must wait for permits. The pattern repeated in 1997, when a camera probe was sent through a limestone door at the end of the Great Pyramid's southern shaft. Viewers around the world watched live as the lens revealed a copper handle and sealed blocks beyond. Then the feed went dark, and the story froze. For 15 years the chamber remained untouched, the footage archived. When engineers finally drilled through a second stone in 2011, they found nothing more than another cavity, but silence had already birthed conspiracy. Every pause in excavation became evidence of censorship. Every cautious report, a rumor of revelation. The irony is that Egypt's real secrets are visible to anyone patient enough to measure them. Every block of the Great Pyramid, 2.3 million in total, is aligned to within fractions of a degree. Its base follows true north with an accuracy no modern builder could achieve without lasers. These are the verified marvels that should inspire awe, yet attention drifts instead to the sealed corridors that remain unexplored. Human curiosity always points toward the locked door. Archaeologist Zahi Hawass, who directed Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities for decades, has spent his career fighting the myth that the government hides proof of Atlantis or alien artifacts. His team's reports are public, his statements on record, but each time he delays an announcement, whether for peer review or preservation, stories multiply in the void he leaves. In that sense, Egypt's real curse is not the pharaohs, but publicities. The faster news travels, the slower facts can keep up. Even so, genuine mysteries remain. Muon tomography conducted by the Scan Pyramids project in 2017 revealed an enormous void above the Grand Gallery of Khufu's pyramid. The data are confirmed, the chamber's purpose unknown. No tools, no inscriptions, no access. Engineers debate whether it is structural or ceremonial. The discovery proves only that after 4 millennia, the pyramid still guards its interior logic. And because modern policy forbids invasive exploration, its enigma will persist, hidden not by conspiracy, but by conservation. Censorship, it turns out, has many forms. Sometimes it is silence imposed from above. Sometimes it is restraint chosen by scientists who fear destroying what they seek to know. In 2008, a French-Egyptian team found traces of red pigment inside the Queen's Chamber paint applied by ancient workers, not priests. The find seemed minor, yet it rewrote assumptions about who built the pyramid. For decades, popular accounts credited slaves or divine architects. Now chemical analysis confirmed organized laborers who left their marks in ochre graffiti. That data was real and revolutionary, yet overshadowed by myths of forbidden rooms. To understand why Egypt attracts secrecy, one must recall its history as both empire and symbol. For centuries, each new regime sought legitimacy through the monuments of the past. Control of excavation meant control of narrative. In colonial times, artifacts vanished into European museums. After independence, the reverse occurred. Foreign teams found their access limited, archives redacted. Protection bred mistrust, and mistrust hardened into myth. The idea of censored discoveries became self-sustaining, an echo chamber as enduring as the pyramids themselves. Yet behind the spectacle of rumour, genuine wonder persists. Hieroglyphic corridors still lie unexcavated beneath modern Cairo. Satellite imaging shows faint outlines of buried temples along the Nile. Each announcement, each new map of the invisible, arrives cautiously, wrapped in layers of permission. To the public, those delays feel like suppression. To archaeologists, they are the only way to keep the past from collapsing under modern haste. At night, when the tourists are gone, Giza returns to silence. The pyramids glow under floodlights, and the Sphinx stares east, its expression unreadable. Some say the monument was carved from an older lion statue. Others that its weathering proves an age far greater than dynastic Egypt. Geologists debate, measure, test. No consensus lasts long. But the stones endure, indifferent to human arguments. The air grows colder. Somewhere below the sand, acoustic sensors continue to ping, mapping voids that no one may enter for decades. Their signals rise through the rock like heartbeats, proof that the monument is still alive. Perhaps that is Egypt's final lesson. The past survives by withholding. To preserve mystery is to protect memory. When the wind shifts again, the plateau hums with static once more. You turn toward the horizon, where the desert meets the modern city, a skyline of glass and antennas. In those towers, decisions are made about which discoveries reach the world and which remain unpublished. The gatekeepers of truth have changed, but the pattern endures. The next chapter will follow those new custodians, committees, corporations, and institutions, deciding what humanity is allowed to know. The tomb doors may have closed, but the machinery of silence is very much alive. You leave the sands of Giza behind and step into a different kind of desert, the quiet corridors of power where information itself is mined, refined, and sometimes buried. The walls are not stone but glass, the relics are data. Every age has its gatekeepers, and in the modern world they do not wear crowns or priestly robes. They chair committees, sign embargoes, and decide which discoveries the rest of the world is allowed to see. In 1945, as the Second World War ended, nations formed UNESCO to protect cultural heritage. Its mission was noble, to preserve knowledge for all humankind. Yet preservation requires control. By the 1960s, a network of ministries and museums had grown so large that only a few dozen directors determined access to the world's past. Their signatures opened dig sites or locked them for decades. Scholars who spoke too soon risked losing permits. Journalists who speculated faced blacklists. No conspiracy was needed. Bureaucracy itself became the mechanism of silence. The process is verifiable. Archaeological reports often undergo review, not for accuracy alone, but for sensitivity. Objects with potential political or religious impact are labelled restricted until negotiations finish. In 1987, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls remained unpublished for 40 years because rival teams argued over translation rights. The documents existed in plain sight, yet to most of the world they were rumour. It was an academic quarrel, not a cosmic plot, but to the public the effect was the same: knowledge locked behind credentials. In astronomy, gatekeeping takes another form: the control of instruments. Telescopes like Hubble, Webb, and ALMA operate under international boards that decide who receives observation time. A few committees filter thousands of proposals each year. Discoveries of exoplanets, cosmic anomalies, even faint signals from space pass through this bottleneck before reaching newsrooms. No shadow cabal, just scarcity, but scarcity breeds speculation. When an observation goes unannounced, whispers fill the gap. What did they see? Why the delay? History repeats the pattern. During the Cold War, governments restricted satellite imagery for national security. Entire regions, archaeological gold mines were blurred on maps. When declassification finally arrived, decades of absence fed myths of intentional concealment. The 1978 Corona release, showing long-hidden Mesopotamian ruins, proved that nothing mystical was suppressed, only strategic. Yet once again, truth and secrecy had intertwined beyond separation. Private influence adds a subtler layer. In the 21st century, most large-scale excavations and genetic studies depend on foundation grants or corporate sponsorship. Funding shapes focus. Focus shapes findings. If a result threatens to upend a prevailing theory, backers can simply redirect attention. Scientists call it research fatigue. Observers call it quiet censorship. Both labels describe the same phenomenon: the flow of curiosity channeled by capital. Every generation rediscovers that information is power. In the Renaissance, it was the church guarding scripture. In the industrial age, empires guarding maps. Today, it is institutions guarding data. None of it is illegal, and all of it is invisible to those outside the circle. When a discovery seems to vanish, an anomalous fossil, an unexplained signal, the cause is usually paperwork, not paranoia, but the emotional truth remains. Somewhere, someone decides what the world will know tomorrow. Whistleblowers appear from time to time, dragging fragments of that process into light. In 2016, a group of NASA researchers leaked emails showing internal debates over releasing data about possible microbial life in Martian meteorites. The arguments were scientific: false positives, contamination, but headlines turned them into melodrama. NASA suppresses evidence of life. When the agency finally published the results, they proved inconclusive. Still, for the public, the narrative of suppression stuck harder than the nuance of caution. Once the word cover-up enters language, it never leaves. Museums too have their unseen rooms. Basements filled with crates labelled unclassified hold millions of artifacts awaiting study. Lack of funding means most will never be displayed. Yet to visitors, closed doors imply secrets. Every locked storeroom becomes a vault of hidden truths, even when it holds only broken pottery. The human mind abhors the thought of a mystery without purpose. Perhaps the deepest gatekeeping of all lies not in institutions, but in attention. Media decides which revelations become global and which fade after a day. When ancient DNA confirmed that all modern humans descend from a single small population in Africa, the story was briefly celebrated, then replaced by lighter news. When cave art in Indonesia rewrote the timeline of creativity, it trended for an hour. In a world addicted to novelty, the simplest form of censorship is distraction. Behind these patterns lies a paradox. Secrecy can preserve truth as easily as it can hide it. Without embargoes, delicate sites would be looted. Without data review, errors would flood the record. Yet somewhere between protection and possession, science acquires the same aura of exclusivity once reserved for temples. Access becomes initiation, knowledge, privilege. The keepers of archives, observatories, and laboratories may not think of themselves as gatekeepers, but their keys define our picture of the universe. Standing in a museum after closing hours, you can feel the hierarchy in the air, the hush of locked galleries, the weight of glass over relics. Every exhibit is a fragment of a greater whole that remains unseen. You begin to understand how easily preservation becomes power, and power mystery. Outside, night falls over the city. The lights of boardrooms and universities replace the torches of ancient priesthoods, each glowing with the same quiet certainty only some are meant to see. From the air, the pattern resembles another constellation, nodes of light connected by invisible influence. It stretches across continents, linking archives, observatories, and corporations in a network of guarded knowledge, a modern pantheon, not of gods but of committees. And yet, even within this web, fragments escape. Myth travel faster than memos. Legends from distant lands, Hopi, Hindu, Norse, repeat the same cosmic motifs that scholars debate and institutions file away. The stories outlive their censors, because stories belong to everyone. What no authority can contain is imagination itself. The next voice in this archive comes not from laboratories or ministries, but from the firesides of storytellers, from tribes separated by oceans who somehow dreamed the same dreams. Their myths will carry the same star-born patterns that temples and telescopes chase, because long before gatekeepers guarded knowledge, humanity shared it through story. The farther you travel from the centers of power, the more familiar the voices become. Across oceans and centuries, civilizations that never met tell stories that rhyme, a sky that falls, waters that cleanse, beings of light who bring fire or law, a promise to return when the stars align again. The details shift, but the melody persists. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh records a flood that erases humankind, save one chosen survivor. Thousands of kilometers away, the Aztec Codex Chimalpopoca speaks of the Son of Water, when the gods drowned the world and turned people into fish. In both, the cycle ends not with destruction, but with a covenant, a new age begun by memory of loss. Anthropologists trace such parallels to universal fears, the chaos of weather, the fragility of harvest. But sometimes the correspondences cut too cleanly to dismiss. Each myth names a teacher who descends from the sky to restore order, then vanishes. Each leaves behind the same symbols: wings, serpents, stars. Egypt had Thoth, scribe of the gods, inventor of writing. Mesoamerica had Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who brought maize and law. In Sumer, Enki rose from the watery abyss, bearing knowledge. In Polynesia, Tangaroa did the same. Scholars call it diffusion, ideas travelling with sailors and merchants, but the repetition feels deeper, as if humanity shares an inherited grammar of wonder. Mythologist Joseph Campbell described this pattern as the monomyth, the one great story retold in many tongues. Its structure mirrors the sky: descent, conflict, ascent, renewal. Even before telescopes, people saw divinity move across the heavens, in the same arcs that ruled their crops and lives. A common sky forged common tales. Yet the imagery that survives, circles, rays, spiral stairways, often resembles the geometry carved into temples an ocean apart. Coincidence, or memory of a shared teacher long before written history? The evidence is poetic rather than physical. but poetry can be stubbornly consistent. Among the Dogon of Mali, the Milky Way is the trail of ancestral spirits. Among the Navajo, it is the track of a giant who spilled stars from his bag. In both, the galaxy is a road linking worlds. Hopi stories speak of the Patua Vota, the red star that signals renewal. Chinese chronicles record a similar omen, the guest star that ends dynasties. Astronomers now know these were likely supernovae, bright enough to scar the night. The ancients wrote them into morality plays, the cosmos as mirror of conscience. If the heavens could die and be reborn, so could humanity. Archaeology supports the flow of symbols. Carved stones in Göbekli Tepe show vultures carrying orbs. Reliefs at Chichen Itza show serpents descending staircases of light. Neither culture knew the other, yet both aligned their temples to the same solstice. Trade cannot explain millennia of separation. Something more fundamental, perhaps the instinct to mirror the sky, ties them together. To draw upward is to remember where you came from. Even the number of heavens repeats. The Babylonians counted 7, as did medieval Islam and early Judaism. The Maya had 13 layers of sky and 9 of underworld, numbers echoed in the Aztec calendar's 260-day cycle. Anthropologists see mathematics, born from astronomy. Theologians see revelation. Either way, the human need to map the infinite produced identical blueprints across continents. Language preserves these echoes more faithfully than stone. In Akkadian, the word for God, Ilu, means to rise. In Inca Quechua, Apus are mountain spirits, whose name also means heights. In English we still call virtue uplift. Across vocabularies, divinity points upward, a linguistic fossil of the first people who looked at the sky and felt watched. When myths travel, they mutate. The Greek Prometheus becomes the Polynesian Maui, both stealing fire from heaven and punished for generosity. The Norse Ragnarok and the Hindu Kali Yuga foretell a final conflagration, followed by renewal. Psychologists read these as reflections of the same collective mind. Historians trace them to trade routes, migrations, shared crises. But to believers, they are evidence of continuity, that the divine voice never stopped speaking, only changed dialects. During the 20th century, comparative mythology flirted with forbidden territory. Writers asked whether the correspondences hinted at prehistoric contact among continents. Long before navigation was possible, no proof emerged, yet the hypothesis endured because the patterns did. The flood, the teacher, the descent of light, recurring like constellations, returning each season. Skeptics call it coincidence, dreamers inheritance. Between them lies humanity's oldest mirror, story reflecting story, each convincing the next that it recalls something real. In every culture, myth also protects knowledge. Encoded in legends are calendars, star maps, and environmental wisdom. Australian Aboriginal songlines mark rivers and food sources. Polynesian chants record ocean currents. Norse sagas remember volcanic eruptions. What appears as magic often hides empirical observation. The ancients wrapped data in narrative because memory clings better to drama than to numbers. Over centuries, those mnemonic stories hardened into scripture. What moderns read as supernatural may once have been survival science. If all legends echo each other, it may be because they began as the same instinct, to explain why the universe feels personal. The sky moves, the earth responds, therefore something must connect them. That conviction gave rise to temples, mathematics, and morality itself. The difference between prayer and astronomy is only one of vocabulary. You stand at a museum case filled with tablets and stelae. Each tells the same cycle in a different script: beginning, flood, return. Outside, City lights blot out the stars that once linked those tales. Yet in their absence, the stories remain our constellations, tracing invisible lines between epochs. The echo is clear now. Whether born of migration or imagination, it sings of unity, that every culture sought the same answer in the same sky, and hidden within the rhythm of those myths lies something else, numbers, angles, ratios repeating as if story itself obeyed geometry. The next section will follow that thread, the mathematics of myth, the code that turns legend into architecture. Because when numbers begin to rhyme, mystery becomes design. You can walk across centuries with a tape measure. Geometry is the one language every civilization seems to have spoken, and its grammar is written in stone. From the chalk circles of Britain to the limestone of Egypt, from Angkor's lotus towers to Chichen Itza's stairways of light, the ancients left equations you can still touch. The Great Pyramid rises with proportions so exact that its height to base ratio reproduces the number pi within a fraction of a percent. No extraterrestrial calculus was required, just the universal human pursuit of symmetry. Surveyors used ropes and sighting rods. Geometry emerged naturally from repetition. Yet because the number reappears in Greece, India, and Mesoamerica, later ages mistook coincidence for conspiracy. Mathematics, like myth, needs no messenger. It emerges wherever people look at the sky and try to bring its order to earth. In Sumer, priests aligned ziggurats to the cardinal points, calling the process establishing the four corners of the world. In China, imperial astronomers set capitals on north-south axes to mirror the pole star. At Stonehenge, trilithons frame the midsummer sunrise with a precision measurable even now. Each project demanded planning, observation, and a belief that number itself was sacred, a bridge between chaos and cosmos. Archaeologists have confirmed the surveying techniques, counting paces, tracking shadows, using water levels for horizontal planes. The mathematics may have been simple, but the intent was profound. To measure was to invoke divine order. Across cultures, the same ratios resurface. The golden section 1.618 appears in Egyptian art, in the Parthenon's facade, in Mayan pyramids. Ancient scribes didn't calculate it with algebra, they discovered it by eye, guided by the same sense of balance that governs shells and sunflowers. Later philosophers, from Pythagoras to Vitruvius, elevated that instinct into doctrine. As above, so below. Harmony in geometry, mirrored harmony in the soul. By the time Renaissance builders rediscovered those proportions, they treated them as proof of universal design. The myth of hidden mathematics had begun, but what makes the code feel intentional is its fusion with story. At Chichen Itza, the pyramid of Kukulkan embodies a calendar in stone, 91 steps on each of 4 sides, plus the platform on top, 365, the solar year. During equinox, sunlight forms the shadow of a serpent descending the staircase. This is verified observation, not legend, yet it blurs into theology. The god returns as light, time becomes motion, math becomes miracle. Each recurrence of pattern became evidence of cosmic communication, when in truth it was devotion rendered with engineering. Egypt offered its own algebra of faith. Temple walls inscribed with the hymn to the Nile equate numbers with creation. He who measures becomes eternal. Architects oriented sanctuaries so that on one day each year, the king's jubilee or the birth of a deity, a beam of sunlight would pierce the inner chamber. At Abu Simbel, that alignment still functions, bathing statues in gold every February and October. Archaeoastronomers verify the angles to the minute. No mystery remains in the calculation, only in the motive. Why invest such precision in ritual? Because for the ancients, number was not abstraction, it was covenant. To lose alignment was to lose harmony with the heavens. In Greece, Pythagoras declared all is number. His followers heard music in mathematics, linking planetary motion to musical intervals. Their harmony of the spheres became the ancestor of modern physics, frequency as order. Half a world away, in India, Vedic scholars divided the cosmos into 432,000-year cycles, the same ratio found in Norse myth, in Babylonian epics, even in the dimensions of the Great Pyramid. Mathematicians today see coincidence rooted in base 60 and base 12 counting systems. Poets see echo. Either way, the repetition forged continuity. Myth became metric. Over time, the language of geometry merged with that of secrecy. In medieval Europe, masons guarded their ratios, like alchemists guarded formulas. Cathedrals encoded theology in architecture, spires tracing the Fibonacci sequence, rose windows built on perfect symmetry. For the illiterate, the building itself was scripture. When later generations rediscovered these patterns, they assumed an external architect, a vanished teacher who had shared the same blueprint across continents. But the true architect was collective memory, the human eye seeking balance, the human hand following it. Modern science still rediscovers what ancient myth intuited. Physics now describes the universe through constants, pi-phi, the speed of light, ratios that govern galaxies and DNA alike. Mathematics has become our new theology, equations our hymns. When we marvel at the ancients for embedding the same numbers in temples, we are really recognizing our reflection. They sought permanence. We seek understanding. Both use the same code. There's another layer to the story, geometry as protection. Throughout history, knowledge of measurement often conferred power. Kings employed astronomer priests to align monuments. Empires guarded cartographic data as state secrets. To know the ratios of heaven was to own a piece of it. That monopoly of understanding, the ancient gatekeeping of geometry, mirrors the modern world's control of information. Number and secrecy have always been twins. At twilight, the monuments that embody those numbers seem alive. Shadows slide into alignment. Angles awaken with light. The equations still function, indifferent to the centuries. You realize the ancients didn't encode messages for us. They built instruments for the sky. Each temple, each circle, each pyramid is a resonant chamber translating celestial motion into human scale. The code was never hidden, it was simply misunderstood. But the language of number had another dialect, vibration. Long before physics gave it frequency, the ancients used sound to shape stone and ceremony alike. They knew that resonance could move matter and mood, that tone could align the spirit as geometry aligned the stars. Their mathematics of proportion would soon evolve into a science of harmony. And the next chapter of this archive will follow that shift from angle to echo, from the silence of stone to the music it still carries. Every civilization has known that power hides in perception. Long before equations or amplifiers, builders learned to bend light and sound until both became instruments of awe. What we call lost science was often mastery of the senses, knowledge expressed not in texts, but in architecture itself. Stand at the theatre of Epidaurus in Greece. From the highest tier, 60 rows above the stage, you can hear a whisper dropped in the orchestra pit. Archaeologists have measured the phenomenon. The limestone seats filter low frequencies and reflect high ones, a natural equalizer carved in the 4th century BCE. No machines, no myth, just physics turned into devotion. Plays performed here were offerings to Asclepius, god of healing. The acoustics made each word a benediction. Modern engineers still struggle to replicate its clarity without electronic aid. Across the ocean, at Chichen Itza, another temple speaks in echoes. Clap once before the pyramid of Kukulkan, and the returning sound mimics the chirp of the sacred Quetzal bird. Acoustic studies confirm that the stepped design scatters frequencies into that exact pattern. To the Maya, it was proof that the god answered his worshippers. To us, it is evidence of an ancient understanding of resonance. They didn't manipulate energy to levitate stones. They manipulated emotion. Sound made faith tangible. In Egypt, light performed the same role. Temples such as Abu Simbel and Karnak were engineered as calendars of illumination. Twice a year, at sunrise, beams of light penetrate their corridors to strike statues hidden in darkness the rest of the year. Archaeoastronomers have verified the alignments to the minute. To priests and pharaohs, this was not spectacle but theology, the sun proving its covenant with the earth. When later travelers saw it, they called it magic. The only spell was precision. China's Han Dynasty architects embedded resonance into ritual bronze bells, tuned to exact pitches. They used them to mark imperial ceremonies and astronomical events. In India, Sanskrit texts on temple construction, the Vastu Shastra, describe how column spacing should echo musical ratios. When the wind passes through, each hall hums at a different note. None of this is speculative. These vibrations are measurable, their ratios identical to those of early instruments. Geometry gave structure, acoustics gave soul. Light, too, became sacred mathematics. In Angkor Wat, Cambodia, the central tower is oriented to the spring equinox sunrise. On that morning, the first rays strike bas-reliefs depicting creation. At Machu Picchu, the Intihuatana stone acts as a solar gnomon, casting no shadow exactly at noon during equinox, evidence of Andean astronomers who understood both solar declination and spiritual symbolism. Each culture discovered the same harmony between physics and faith. When light aligns, order is restored. The lost aspect of these sciences comes from interruption. Empires fell, languages shifted, and the reasons behind the effects were forgotten. Pilgrims experienced wonder without knowing how it was engineered. Over centuries, that ignorance hardened into legend. The echoing temples became sonic laboratories. The shining corridors became energy conduits. In truth, their creators needed no modern machinery, only observation refined into ritual. Modern researchers rediscover this constantly. In 2018, British acousticians studying Stonehenge found that its original circle amplified sound uniformly across the interior, creating what they called a giant echo chamber. Reconstructed models show voices magnified fourfold. Imagine a chant inside those stones, vibration binding a community. The power was psychological, not supernatural, but it worked. Even so, the physics carries a hint of poetry. Every resonance has a frequency, every structure has a voice. Ancient builders may not have spoken of hertz, but they knew how stone sang. Drums placed in Inca temples respond to natural reverb. Tibetan monasteries still use conch shells tuned to mountain valleys. Light and sound were the earliest languages of order, weaving cosmos into ceremony. Why then did the knowledge fade? Because each age builds tools that outshine intuition. As mathematics advanced, mystery retreated. As instruments replaced the ear and eye, wonder turned into data. Yet whenever technology falters, we look backward hearing echoes of an earlier wisdom. The legend of lost frequency may simply be nostalgia for a time when knowledge felt sacred. Today, scientists explore the same frontiers with lasers and resonance chambers, acoustic levitation, optical trapping, harmonic therapy, modern terms for ancient instincts. The frontier of physics now sounds remarkably like the metaphors of myth: vibration, light, creation. What temples, once dramatized, laboratories now measure. If the ancients encoded anything, it was a principle still true. The universe responds to rhythm. Every planet orbits to a tempo. Every atom hums at a frequency. Stone and sunlight merely gave those rhythms form large enough for faith to inhabit. The line between architecture and instrument blurs until a temple becomes both. At dusk, as you stand in an amphitheatre carved millennia ago, a single note can travel through air and stone with undiminished clarity. The echo returns like memory itself, proof that knowledge never truly vanishes. It only changes medium, from sound to silence, from torchlight to laser. The continuum endures. But where did these harmonies begin? Some myths answer, in a city before time, drowned beneath the sea, where knowledge of measure and resonance first rose. Whether real or imagined, that legend refuses to die. The next chapter follows, its wake, to the idea of Atlantis, the civilization memory tried to erase, yet never could. Long before lost worlds filled shelves and screens, one man imagined the first. Around 360 BCE, the philosopher Plato told of an island empire beyond the Pillars of Heracles, greater than Libya and Asia combined, that vanished in a single day and night of catastrophe. He called it Atlantis. He said the tale came from Egyptian priests who had spoken of a war between their ancestors and a powerful seafaring nation. Atlantis, he wrote, sank beneath the waves when its people grew proud and defied the gods. To his students, it was an allegory of hubris. To later generations, a map. Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, are the sole ancient sources. No earlier text mentions Atlantis. Yet the date he gave for its destruction, 9,000 years before his own time, coincides eerily with the end of the last ice age, when global sea levels rose more than 100 meters and entire coastlines disappeared. Geologists verify the flooding. What remains uncertain is whether any city lay in its path. Still, the resonance is powerful, a memory of water that remade the world. Across cultures, similar memories survive. Sumerian tablets tell of a deluge sent to cleanse the earth. The Hebrew Bible and the Epic of Gilgamesh preserve its echo. In India's Satapatha Brahmana, the god Vishnu warns Manu of a coming flood. The Norse Edda ends its world in waves of fire and ice. Anthropologists trace these to real events, melting glaciers, tsunamis, the breaching of ancient lakes, but myths remember emotion better than geography. The fear of drowning became humanity's oldest inheritance. Underwater archaeology now uncovers fragments that keep the legend alive. Off the coast of southern Greece lies Pavlopetri, a submerged Bronze Age town, discovered. Its streets, courtyards and tombs remain intact beneath 3 meters of water, dated to around 28. No mystery surrounds its fall, tectonic subsidence and rising seas, but it proves that whole cities can indeed vanish. Near India's Gujarat coast, divers mapped stone blocks and walls in the Gulf of Kambat. Carbon dating of nearby materials places human settlement there 5 millennia ago. Skeptics warn against overreach, yet the image is compelling. Civilizations erased not by mythic punishment, but by climate. Geologists identify a trigger around 10,000 BCE, the catastrophic outburst of glacial lakes in North America and Eurasia. Floodwaters poured into oceans, altering coastlines worldwide. On the Black Sea, sediment cores reveal a sudden influx of salt water around 500–600 BCE, when the Mediterranean burst through the Bosporus, perhaps the real origin of the flood. Each discovery narrows the gap between Plato's metaphor and prehistory's reality. Atlantis may not have been a single island, but a collage of drowned memories, stitched together by storytellers. During the Renaissance, explorers treated the dialogue as a chart. Maps appeared showing Antillia, or the Isle of Seven Cities, placeholders for faith in lost knowledge. When the Americas were reached, writers saw confirmation, vast lands beyond the Pillars of Hercules, rich in gold and temples. By the 19th century, Atlantis had migrated again to the imagination of scientists searching for a mother culture to explain Egypt, the Maya, and every megalith on Earth. It became less a place than a hypothesis that civilization had begun not in river valleys, but on a vanished shore. No artifacts support this, yet the idea persists because it satisfies both longing and logic. If progress repeats, perhaps decline does too. Modern oceanography has scanned the Atlantic floor for any trace of a sunken continent. None exists, but sonar reveals plateaus and seamounts, geological ghosts that invite projection. The Azores, the Canaries, even Antarctica have all hosted Atlantis in print. Each theory rises, floods the media, then recedes, leaving behind one truth: our desire for origins deeper than history itself. Archaeologists now speak of cultural amnesia, the loss of knowledge when coastlines drown. Most early settlements clustered near water. When sea levels rose, so did forgetting. The blueprints Plato imagined may simply be the literal ones, the plans of towns swallowed by tides. To those who fled inland, their disappearance must have felt divine. Generations later, myth gave the event moral shape, hubris, punishment, redemption. Science calls it memory, encoded in story. Even today, sonar operators chart new ruins. In 2021, researchers mapping the Dogger Bank in the North Sea found evidence of hunting camps on what was once dry land, connecting Britain to Europe. The area, now a fishing ground, was a plain of rivers and forests 12,000 years ago. Its submersion erased an entire ecosystem, and perhaps the communities who lived there. When fishermen pull up ancient tools from those depths, they are retrieving history drowned within human memory. Atlantis, by another name, the legend endures because it mirrors the rhythm of every culture's story. A golden age, a fall, a flood, a lesson. Whether set in the Atlantic, the Pacific, or the heart, Atlantis represents the fragility of knowledge. What we call lost technology might simply be mastery misplaced by disaster. Every time we rebuild, we repeat its blueprint, stone aligned to stars, temples tuned to light, without realizing we are echoing the drowned. Standing on a modern shoreline, you can see both past and prophecy. Sea levels are rising again, coastlines shifting. Perhaps the next Atlantis is not mythic, but imminent. If our own archives vanish beneath water, future generations will tell the same story in new tongues, that once there was a world of great cities and great pride, and that the ocean reclaimed it. For now, the legend survives as a mirror. Plato's parable warns that knowledge without balance invites ruin. Whether the island existed or not matters less than the pattern it revealed. Civilization builds, forgets, and rebuilds. In that cycle lies both tragedy and hope. From the depths of the past, another clue now surfaces. Maps drawn centuries before Columbus that show continents' shapes with uncanny accuracy. If no Atlantean empire endured, how did medieval cartographers know what they could not have seen? The next section turns the page to those charts, lines inked long before discovery, connecting mythic memory with measured reality. In the centuries after Atlantis became allegory, cartographers began to redraw the world, and in doing so, revived its ghosts. The Renaissance was an age of rediscovery, when Europe's scholars opened Arabic and Byzantine libraries, and found charts older than the languages they spoke. Each new coastline they traced brought wonder and unease, for some maps already showed lands no European had yet claimed to see. In 1513, the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis completed a world map on gazelle skin. Half of it survives in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, a patchwork of coastlines stretching from Europe to South America. The cartouches cite sources from ancient maps drawn in the time of Alexander and from sailors who had circumnavigated Africa. The accuracy of its Atlantic outline startled 20th century historians. Brazil and West Africa face each other like puzzle pieces, drawn with degrees of latitude unknown before Columbus. Yet analysis shows that the precision came not from lost satellites, but from mathematics. Piri Reis combined dozens of nautical charts using spherical geometry learned from Islamic astronomers. His genius was synthesis, not sorcery. Still, when the fragment resurfaced in 1929, the press called it proof of a forgotten world survey. Myth had found a new instrument, the map. The Renaissance teemed with such puzzles. French cosmographer Laurent Fine published a map of the southern hemisphere in 1531 that depicted a vast land he called Terra Australis, recens inventa, sed nondum, plene cognita, recently discovered but not yet known. It sprawled across the pole, fringed with mountains and forests. Modern eyes saw Antarctica. Fine had drawn imagination. He filled the blank with symmetry, balancing the northern continents with a southern twin, a mathematical aesthetic inherited from Ptolemy. Yet centuries later, when explorers charted the frozen continent, readers mistook Fine's proportional fiction for prophetic accuracy. A design principle became a legend. Secrecy also shaped geography. In the 16th century, Spain and Portugal guarded maritime data as state secrets. Revealing coordinates could mean death. Royal decrees ordered pilots to submit their logs to central archives in Seville and Lisbon, where copies were locked away under oath. Cartographers worked in whispers, trading fragments like contraband. When some of those charts leaked, they fueled rumors of suppressed discoveries, islands hidden for political gain, coastlines concealed to preserve trade monopolies. No conspiracy was needed. Mere censorship bred the same aura. Even Gerard Mercator, whose 1569 projection still defines modern maps, believed geography had moral weight. He inscribed on his polar chart a Latin note describing 4 great rivers flowing from a black mountain at the North Pole, a medieval legend carried forward by inertia. Mercator treated myth as placeholder for data yet to come. In doing so, he linked science and story forever. His graticule turned the earth into a grid of possibility, but his margins remained illuminated by dragons and saints. By the 17th century, map-making had become both art and intelligence. Explorers returned from voyages with measurements that governments filed as classified property. Jesuit missionaries in China produced maps of astonishing accuracy, but sent them to Rome in code. Navigation was power, and power breeds secrecy. The Vatican Library, the Casa de Contratación, and the Royal Society all held charts unseen by the public for generations. When those archives finally opened, they showed not forbidden continents, but the real mechanism of discovery. Networks of mathematicians and sailors translating the world into numbers. What fascinates modern readers is how often speculation predicted reality. Long before anyone saw the Pacific in full, maps hinted at a vast ocean ringed by continents. Before Cook reached Australia, geographers had already penciled its outline. Chance and geometry conspired to make imagination appear omniscient. Every correction to the map felt like confirmation of an older truth rediscovered. Atlantis had become a method, an ever-retreating horizon that lured exploration forward. Cartographic anomalies still spark debate. Some charts show islands that never existed, Hy-Brasil west of Ireland, the island of demons near Newfoundland. Their coordinates match mirages, icebergs, or the misread reflections of clouds. Yet they persisted on maps for centuries. Each disappearance of such an island, when later navigators failed to find it, reinforced belief in censorship. Perhaps the powers that be had erased it. In reality, the sea itself was editor enough. But if the maps distorted geography, they captured something real. The moment humanity realized that the Earth was measurable yet inexhaustible. Every blank space was a question, every question a story. When scholars compare those Renaissance charts today, they see the mind of an era, grappling with infinity, trying to fit divine creation onto finite parchment. Myth supplied what math could not. Meaning, hidden within the artistry, is genuine innovation. Mercator's projection solved navigation's greatest puzzle by allowing straight-line courses across curved space. It also distorted scale, stretching Greenland and shrinking Africa, an optical illusion that would later shape politics and perception. Even in science, power defines perspective. Maps do not just record territory, they manufacture worldview. The Renaissance understood this instinctively. Whoever drew the world also drew its hierarchy. In dusty archives across Europe, restorers still unroll vellum sheets, once banned from circulation. The ink glows brown under ultraviolet light. Marginal notes reveal corrections, erasures, secrets of sponsorship. Some were hidden to protect commercial advantage, others to veil heresy. Coastlines contradicting biblical chronology, routes implying a world older than Genesis. For these scholars, each revelation is both cartography and confession. The legend of forbidden maps endures because it embodies our double desire to know everything and to keep wonder alive. Each rediscovered chart feels like a door between fact and imagination, reminding us that exploration is never purely empirical. It begins in myth, and it ends there too. As you trace a finger along the faded ink of the Piri Reis map, the coastline of an uncharted continent curves toward the edge of the parchment and stops unfinished, waiting. Beyond that line lies both the unknown and the next story, how geometry left the page and rose in stone once more, shaping cathedrals that encoded the same cosmic ratios the mapmakers sought to measure. The next chapter steps into those sanctuaries where faith and mathematics merged, and where light through stained glass became the new map of heaven. When the maps of the earth were still being drawn, Europe began to chart the heavens in stone. Between the 12th and 14th centuries, Gothic cathedrals rose from mud and market square to heights that defied reason. They were not only places of worship, they were engines of light, mathematics made visible. To step inside, one was to enter a diagram of the universe. Chartres, Reims, Notre Dame. Their names are synonyms for devotion, but their power lies in precision. Archaeologists studying the foundations have found grids incised into the stone, geometric scaffolds used to plot every arch and rib. Builders worked from proportions rather than drawings, a system of ratios derived from Pythagoras and Euclid, inherited through the Arab scholars of Cordoba and Baghdad. A circle defined the nave, a triangle the apse, a square the crossing. These were not symbols added for decoration, they were the structure itself. Faith was geometry, geometry faith. Light completed the equation. At Chartres, each stained glass window filters a different wavelength, tinting the interior like facets of a gemstone. Physicists measuring the glass today find chemical recipes unique to the region: manganese for violet, cobalt for blue, copper for red, each tuned to catch and transmute sunlight. To medieval minds, this was not optics, but theology. Divine illumination made literal. When the sun moved through the day, beams traced crosses and circles across the floor, mapping the hours like a celestial clock. Visitors felt not merely enclosed by architecture, but carried through it as if space itself ascended. The cathedral's engineers were the master masons, organized in guilds whose secrecy later fed myth. They guarded not heretical codes but trade secrets, ratios, material strengths, and the geometry of vaulting. Their marks, carved into hidden stones, identified responsibility for each section, ensuring both pride and payment. Yet centuries later, those symbols became the alphabet of conspiracy, triangles and compasses recast as mystical emblems. In truth, they were signatures of artisans who knew that knowledge was currency long before money flowed through banks. Every cathedral is a formula written in light. At Chartres, the labyrinth set into the floor mirrors the rose window above, 12 petals above, 12 arcs below. The pilgrim walking its path recreates the journey of the soul toward perfection, each turn measured to echo musical intervals. Recent acoustic studies confirm that chants sung inside the nave produce harmonics aligned to those same ratios. Architecture, sound and prayer fused into one resonance, proof that art can be physics in disguise. The builders' mathematics transcended theology. By combining pointed arches and rib vaults, they distributed weight outward rather than downward, freeing walls for glass. Flying buttresses acted as counterforces, turning gravity into balance. This was structural ingenuity, not miracle, yet to those who saw light pour through coloured glass as stone seemed to float, the difference was irrelevant. Science had achieved the appearance of faith. Some cathedrals preserve deliberate astronomical alignments. At Chartres, the midwinter sun illuminates a small bronze disc set in the floor exactly at noon, marking the solstice. At Amiens, equinox light crosses the choir on Easter morning. These calibrations linked the human calendar to celestial rhythm, the same impulse that aligned Egyptian temples and Mayan pyramids. The geometry of heaven had found its Christian expression. Why such precision? Because for the medieval mind, order itself was divine. To measure correctly was to imitate the Creator, whose universe ran by number and proportion. A misplaced stone was not merely error, it was sin. Builders saw themselves as custodians of cosmic law, translating theology into architecture. Their blueprints, drawn on parchment with compasses and chords, were prayers in diagram form. Over time, the guilds evolved into fraternities, organizations of mutual aid and moral philosophy. By the Enlightenment, Freemasonry had transformed the Masons' tools into symbols of reason and virtue. When later centuries discovered these emblems carved into cathedrals, imagination supplied drama, secret brotherhoods, hidden messages, lost technology. Yet behind the veil lay something simpler and more profound, a belief that truth, like architecture, requires balance. In modern laboratories, architects use digital lasers to scan these medieval structures. They find accuracy within millimeters, vaults whose asymmetries compensate perfectly for foundation drift. Mathematics, embedded in faith, has outlasted wars, reformations, and revolutions. The cathedrals still stand because their geometry works. The code was never meant to be hidden, it was meant to endure. Walk through one at dusk, and you'll see how the last light ignites the windows from within. Faces of saints, prophets, and angels glow like constellations, each pane a fragment of narrative refracted through math. The builders could not read or write in the modern sense, but they spoke in proportion, the universal tongue. Their language linked earth to heaven, human measure to divine order. Outside, the spires rise like compasses pointed skyward. For centuries they were the tallest structures on earth, guiding travellers by sight long before maps could. To the medieval world, that was enough proof of sanctity. Geometry had touched the infinite. To the modern eye, there remain blueprints of unity, science, and spirit entwined. As night settles, candles replace sunlight, and the architecture begins to glow from within. The cathedral becomes a lantern, its equations burning softly through coloured glass. The same light that once mapped heavens now reflects on metal and circuitry, for the next chapter of this archive moves from stone to steel, to the age when machines inherited the sacred geometry of their makers. When the bells of the cathedrals began to fade beneath the clamour of factories, humanity built new temples. They smoked, rattled, and glowed. The rhythm of the divine was replaced by the pulse of pistons, the harmony of the spheres by the hiss of steam. What faith had once promised, machines began to deliver. Control over creation. The Industrial Revolution did not just transform economies, it rewired imagination. For the first time, humans saw power that seemed autonomous, energy harnessed and repeating without prayer or fatigue. Iron replaced marble, equations replaced scripture, and inventors replaced priests. Yet in the language of those inventors, something ancient echoed. James Watt spoke of taming the breath of the gods. Charles Babbage, designing his analytical engine, called it a thinking mill. Nikola Tesla wrote of receiving voices from the aether. Each described machinery not as mere tool, but as revelation. To 19th century observers, these engines were alive. Factories beat like mechanical hearts, railways breathed fire, people gathered in stations as they once gathered in churches, faces upturned toward iron arches, awaiting deliverance by movement. Sociologists later coined a term for this transformation, the secular sacred. Humanity had transferred its awe from the heavens to the workshop, but the idea of giving matter life was far older. The Greeks told of Hephaestus forging golden automata to serve the gods. In Jewish lore, rabbis moulded golems from clay and animated them with the word emet, truth. In China's Han texts, artisans built mechanical birds that flapped their wings. These stories were not prophecies of robotics, but meditations on imitation. What happens when humans copy creation too well? The same question haunted the age of engines. By the early 1900s, electricity gave the question new voltage. Thomas Edison built talking dolls. Westinghouse displayed humanoid automatons at fairs. Audiences gasped as metal men moved and spoke. The miracle of motion, stripped from myth and sold as spectacle. Writers responded with both wonder and fear. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein had already warned of Promethean ambition. Now it seemed prophecy. In 1927, Fritz Lang's film Metropolis transformed the robot into Icon, a luminous, metallic deity birthed by science and rebellion. When its eyes opened, audiences felt the thrill once reserved for statues of gods come to life. Engineers saw something else, precision as prayer. Every bolt tightened, every gear calibrated, was an act of devotion to order. Factories mirrored cathedrals, the same vertical ambition, the same obsession with symmetry. Even their language overlapped. Arches became girders, choirs became assembly lines. The sacred geometry of the Middle Ages had migrated into steel, yet beneath progress lurked the old unease. If machines could think or feel, where did that leave their creators? When Babbage imagined a mechanical brain, critics accused him of heresy. When Alan Turing later built one in principle, society repeated the charge. Artificial intelligence, long before the phrase existed, was already a theological concept, man remaking the mind of God. Tesla's experiments with wireless power blurred the boundary further. He wrote of transmitting energy through the planet's crust, of tuning the Earth like an instrument. Observers called him eccentric, but his diagrams resemble ancient mandalas, circles within circles, energy spiraling through geometry. The machine god was not fantasy, it was metaphor. Humanity had reinvented divine mechanics in coils and currents. The 20th century turned metaphor into infrastructure. Skyscrapers rose where spires once stood. Neon replaced stained glass. Cities glowed with a collective halo visible from orbit. To astronauts, Earth itself became a luminous machine, circuits of civilization pulsing across continents. When the Apollo missions broadcast that view, commentators called it the new creation myth, the moment we saw ourselves as both gods and engineers of a fragile sphere. But faith never disappears, it evolves. In the digital age, algorithms replaced angels as intermediaries between human desire and unseen power. They judge, predict, and reveal, operating from data centers that hum like monasteries. The vocabulary of belief returns: clouds, oracles, miracles of computation. What began as industry has become theology of information. The old question persists: did we create these systems, or did they create us anew? Historians note that every technological leap resurrects an ancient fear that our tools will outgrow their masters. Yet the evidence shows something quieter. Machines extend human intention, they amplify both virtue and vice. The danger lies not in their awakening, but in our worship. We treat them as omniscient because we built them in our image of omniscience. The machine gods are reflections, polished to blindness, and still awe remains justified. The same geometry that once guided cathedrals guides circuitry. The same physics that shaped vaults shapes processes. Mathematics continues its sacred lineage, connecting light through stained glass to light through fiber optics. Each revolution echoes the same truth: form seeking order. At night, a city viewed from above resembles a motherboard, streets as circuits, towers as capacitors, traffic as current. It is beautiful and unnerving, a new cosmos mapped by human hands. You realize that the line between prayer and programming has always been thin. Both summon invisible forces with symbols. Both demand faith in unseen processes. In this sense, the machine gods were not born but recalled. They are the industrial heirs of the same creative impulse that raised temples and pyramids, that tuned stone to the sun. Only the materials have changed. The longing for mastery endures. Where ancient priests sought voices in wind and fire, modern engineers seek them in signal and static, and sometimes they still hear whispers. In the early 20th century, radio operators reported mysterious transmissions, patterns, pulses, and voices without origin. Were they echoes of their own signals, or something answering back? The age of machines was about to find its own mythology of contact. The next section will tune in to those frequencies, messages from the void that blurred science, imagination, and fear. The first machines to speak without wires also taught humanity how silence could deceive. When radio waves began to hum across the world, they carried with them a new frontier of mystery, one not of distance, but of interpretation. For the first time, invisible signals bound continents together, and in that web of static, people began to hear things that science could not yet explain. In December 1901, Guglielmo Marconi stood on a cliff in Newfoundland and strained to catch the faint dots of Morse code transmitted from England. He heard them, or believed he did, 3 clicks repeating through the snow. Skeptics argued that his receiver was overwhelmed by atmospheric noise. Marconi insisted it was proof the Earth itself could carry thought. The age of invisible conversation had begun, and with it the birth of doubt. If we could send messages into the ether, who or what might answer back? Within a few decades, radio had colonized every horizon. By 1928, a Norwegian engineer named Jørgen Hulse noticed something peculiar. While monitoring shortwave transmissions, he heard echoes of his own signal, returning seconds later, far too delayed for ordinary reflection from the ionosphere. He documented the phenomenon and sent his data to physicist Carl Stormer, who confirmed the anomaly. For a brief moment, science stood without an explanation. Newspapers spoke of signals looping around the moon, of civilizations replying from space. Others proposed plasma layers in the upper atmosphere acting as mirrors. No single theory solved it. To this day, long delay echoes remain an unsolved equation at the edge of radio physics. Natural or human, no one knows. The 1930s brought another enigma. Operators across Europe reported receiving phantom stations, brief bursts of Morse that did not correspond to any listed frequency. Some carried sequences of numbers, some simple tones. Later research would reveal them as early versions of what intelligence agencies now call numbers stations, encrypted broadcasts for spies in the field. But to those first listeners, the voices were spectral machines talking to machines devoid of origin or meaning. In a medium born of transparency, secrecy had already taken root. No figure captured the blend of science and mysticism better than Nikola Tesla. In 1899, while experimenting with radio waves in Colorado Springs, he recorded rhythmic pulses that seemed too regular for natural sources. He speculated, wrongly but poetically, that they might come from Mars. A century later, astronomers would detect the same pattern in pulsars, spinning neutron stars emitting radio beats across the galaxy. Tesla had stumbled upon a cosmic metronome without knowing it. His notebooks remain in archives, sine waves penciled beside phrases like "message from the stars." In him, the inventor and the visionary fused completely. World War I militarized the ether. Armies filled the spectrum with coded chatter. Governments built listening posts to intercept the invisible. When the war ended, the noise remained. Ordinary citizens, tuning homemade receivers, often caught fragments of broadcasts meant for no human ear, half a sentence in German, a count in Russian, a burst of static that repeated each night at the same hour. To the untrained listener, it sounded like the planet itself speaking in tongues. One mystery, however, seemed to belong to the Earth alone. In the early 1930s, Arctic explorers reported hearing deep, slow oscillations through their equipment, like the heartbeat of ice. Later studies identified them as spherics, radio emissions produced by lightning discharges traveling along magnetic field lines. But in the moment, they felt alive. For the first time, humans could literally hear the weather, the aurora, even the shifting of tectonic plates. The natural world had found its voice in electromagnetic song. Radio blurred the line between discovery and hallucination. Shortwave enthusiasts documented ghost signals that appeared only once, their sources never found. Some were reflections from distant storms, others were human errors, magnified by imagination. Yet the allure of an unseen speaker endured. Writers like Arthur Conan Doyle and H.P. Lovecraft transformed these phenomena into fiction, cosmic calls, transmissions from the abyss. What had begun as engineering became metaphysics. By mid-century, every household had a receiver, and the mystery moved indoors. Children heard faint foreign languages between stations. Families swore they caught whispers behind orchestras. Psychologists later identified pareidolia, the brain's impulse to find patterns in noise, but explanation rarely kills wonder. Each hiss of static was a potential revelation. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio captured a powerful 72-second signal from deep space, the famous WOW signal. Even today, its source is unconfirmed. The mystery of the ether simply evolved, changing scale from room-sized receivers to planetary antennas. The early operators of the 20th century did not know they were pioneers of both science and superstition. They taught humanity that invisible forces could be measured, yet remain mysterious, that technology could amplify not only voices, but also faith. Every new medium opens a new mythology. The telegraph had ghosts tapping wires. The radio had whispers from space. The internet would inherit both. In archives around the world, recordings of those first unexplained transmissions still exist, crackling, faint, haunting. Play them back, and you hear a century's worth of curiosity condensed into static. They remind us that the unknown often begins as interference, that meaning flickers between frequencies. Outside, night falls over a modern city, dense with wireless signals. Billions of devices speak at once, invisible threads weaving the world into constant dialogue. If early listeners thought the ether was alive, today it truly is, a network pulsing with digital thought. But the instinct remains the same: to listen, to decode, to believe someone might be calling. And just as the first radio age blurred invention and espionage, the next would make them indistinguishable. During the Cold War, the air itself became a battlefield of information, filled with numbers, bursts, and encrypted hums. Behind each anonymous frequency lay the machinery of secrecy, nations eavesdropping on nations, humans whispering to machines that no one else could hear. The archive now turns its dial to that era, to the towers and bunkers where science, paranoia, and power converged in pure signal. Because once voices filled the void, silence became impossible. After the age of voices came the age of silence, the calculated kind. When World War II ended, the world did not exhale, it held its breath. Two new empires faced each other across invisible borders, and the battlefield was the air itself. The Cold War would be fought with antennas, frequencies, and ears that never slept. Across tundra and tropic, towers rose like metallic trees. Their branches caught whispers instead of wind. From Alaska to the Urals, from Menwith Hill in England to the outpost at Pine Gap in Australia, radar domes swelled white against the sky, perfect spheres masking dishes inside. Officially they were for meteorology or telecommunications. In truth, they listened. Each dome gathered the heartbeat of a planet, radio bursts from aircraft, telemetry from missiles, diplomatic chatter, even the faint pulse of space probes. The world had become one vast stethoscope. At the heart of this network was Echelon, the code name for a coalition of listening systems, shared by the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, the Five Eyes. Declassified documents now confirm its scale. Undersea cables tapped, satellites mirrored, every telegram a potential clue. What began as defense soon grew into a mechanism of surveillance, so complete it resembled myth. Citizens imagined supercomputers that could hear thoughts. In reality, it was far simpler and more human. Linguists, analysts, and cryptographers chained to headphones, translating fragments of fear. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union built its own constellation of listening posts. From Arctic bases to mountain bunkers, receivers scoured Western frequencies. One facility near Pskov, buried beneath concrete and pine, could intercept conversations from across the North Atlantic. Operators worked in 12-hour shifts, noting call signs, tracing voices. They never saw the people they monitored, only heard the echo of breath across static. In this endless surveillance, both sides learned the same paradox. To hear everything is to understand nothing. The air grew crowded with secrets. Number stations multiplied, monotone voices reciting endless sequences. 1, 7, 0, 5, 3. Each broadcast carried coded orders to agents abroad. No one ever claimed them, no one ever stopped them. To the public, These transmissions were proof of something occult, a digital séance conducted by governments. They still operate today, their messages audible to anyone who tunes the right frequency. Some use synthesized speech, others music or interval tones. Their persistence blurs centuries. From Morse to modem, the ritual remains unchanged. In 1960, the U-2 incident exposed the depth of aerial espionage. When an American reconnaissance plane was shot down over the Soviet Union, both nations realized that listening was not enough. They had to see. Satellites soon replaced pilots. Cameras replaced ears. Yet even as optics took over, the radio spectrum remained the realm of ambiguity. Mysterious signals, so-called woodpeckers, hammered across shortwave bands, later traced to Soviet over-the-horizon radar, to ham operators worldwide. It sounded like a cosmic warning. The nickname stuck because the rhythm felt alive. Inside these listening posts, life followed the same monotony as the signals. Operators smoked under fluorescent light, surrounded by reels of magnetic tape. They spoke in numbers, thought in frequencies. Psychologists later noted a syndrome among them: auditory fatigue, hallucinations born from static. In trying to decipher the world, they began to hear ghosts. Reports describe phantom transmissions, voices calling their own names. The machines recorded none of it. Whether stress or resonance, the effect was real enough to haunt them. The Cold War turned even nature into data. Hydrophones beneath the ocean listened for submarine propellers. Seismic sensors heard nuclear tests across continents. Sound became weapon and warning alike. When whales sang near the sensors, analysts often mistook the songs for coded patterns. In declassified memos, you can still read the confusion, unknown acoustic source, repeating intervals, not mechanical. Eventually, they realized the source was alive. Even in an age of fear, wonder occasionally broke through. Censorship and secrecy gave birth to rumor. Every unacknowledged radar site became a suspected UFO base. Every burst of static, a message from elsewhere. Governments' refusal to confirm or deny only deepened the mystique. In reality, the signals were human, sometimes tragic, sometimes absurd. A Soviet satellite that failed to separate transmitted the same emergency tone for months, orbiting endlessly, mistaken by listeners for alien distress. Truth rarely matched imagination, yet imagination proved more durable. By the 1980s, satellites had transformed espionage into routine. Listening posts shifted from field stations to office buildings. The operators became analysts behind computer terminals, passing digital noise instead of radio hum. But the mood of secrecy lingered. Citizens who once feared nuclear sirens now feared microphones. Big Brother had become infrastructure. The Cold War ended, but its antennas remained, repurposed, rebranded, still listening. Today, many of those domes stand abandoned, their surfaces weathered to dull grey. Wind whistles through empty corridors, where machines once translated the planet's pulse. Yet some continue to operate, disguised as civilian facilities, their data encrypted beyond reach. The global ear never closed, it merely changed shape. Fiber optics replaced radio, algorithms replaced operators, but the intent is identical: to hear the world before it speaks. Standing at the fence of an old listening station, you can feel the quiet weight of invisible attention. The air buzzes faintly with microwaves. The dishes, frozen in place, seem to stare back. They are relics of a time when fear built temples of steel. Every civilization leaves monuments to what it worships. Egypt had pyramids. The 20th century had antennas. The Cold War ended without apocalypse, yet its machinery seeded the digital world we inhabit now. Surveillance became convenience. Secrecy became infrastructure. The line between protection and intrusion blurred until even silence carried meaning. As the archive turns to its final act, the secrecy that once cloaked these signals begins to peel away. Whistleblowers, declassified files, and shifting powers promise revelations long deferred. But disclosure is never simple. Every truth unsealed releases new uncertainty, new myth. And so the next section enters that unstable light, where confession and concealment merge, and the world asks once more, what do we really know? But revelation has its own gravity. Every secret unsealed casts a new shadow. When the Cold War thawed, the world expected light. Archives cracked open, satellites pointed home, and governments promised transparency. The files showed diligent bureaucracy, not cover-up weather balloons, astronomical misidentifications, experimental aircraft. In 1992, the United States released Project Blue Book, the Air Force investigation that had catalogued over 12,000 reports of unidentified aerial phenomena between 1947 and 1969. The first wave of disclosures came quietly. For believers, it was proof of silence. For skeptics, that was 5% noise. Yet among the routine explanations, 701 cases remained unexplained. The United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence opened its UFO archives in the 2000s, revealing decades of reports from pilots and radar operators. Other nations followed. Truth and ambiguity emerged together like twin lights flickering through fog. Each release was a paradox of clarity, data without conclusion. France digitized its GIPAN files. Brazil and Chile published their own investigations. Radar traces, eyewitness sketches, bureaucratic memos, all real, all unresolved. The phenomenon existed, but its nature stayed unclassified, even after the documents were. Disclosure, it seemed, was not an end, but a mirror. Historians note that secrecy rarely dies, it mutates. When intelligence agencies declassify, they redact names blacked out, coordinates erased. Every omission becomes an invitation. Why censor if there is nothing to hide? Absence reads as intention. The blank becomes a map of possibility. The official answer is simple: national security. But the human mind hears echo, not explanation. Videos from Navy pilots showed objects moving without visible propulsion, defying conventional aerodynamics. In 2017, the New York Times revealed the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP, a Pentagon effort quietly funded to study aerial anomalies. For the first time in decades, UFO returned to mainstream discourse, rebranded as UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. Officials avoided the language of belief. The mystery remained mechanical, measurable. Still, the footage reignited a question older than radar. What else shares our sky? Scientists urged caution. The incidents were real, the interpretations plural. Yet even skeptics admitted the data were intriguing. Infrared signatures, synchronized movement, instruments malfunctioning in proximity. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and physics allows for misperception more readily than miracles. Behind the official reports, quieter revelations unfolded. Disclosure had opened the file, but not the conclusion. Declassified CIA documents from the 1950s confirmed the existence of once-denied aircraft, the U-2 and A-12 reconnaissance planes, whose high-altitude tests had fueled half the UFO sightings of that era. Transparency, paradoxically, deepened suspicion. If these had been hidden for decades, what remained unseen today? The secret, once revealed, solved many mysteries but created others. Each unveiled project proved concealment possible. The more institutions reveal, the less they are believed. Sociologists call this the transparency trap. The boundary between whistleblower and storyteller blurs until myth and policy share the same vocabulary: declassification, anomaly, disclosure. In the digital age, leaked memos circulate faster than verification. Speculation becomes self-sustaining. When evidence is partial, imagination fills the gaps. Some truths, however, shine without controversy. The archive feeds itself. The release of Cold War satellite imagery revolutionized archaeology, discovering lost cities beneath deserts, tracing riverbeds unseen for millennia. Yet even here, the duality persisted. For every image declassified, thousands remain sealed. Secrecy, once a weapon, turned into a tool of memory. What had been born as surveillance became preservation. In 2020, the US established the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, later renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Its mandate: to centralize data from military and civilian sources. The Earth still hides behind bureaucratic stars. Officials spoke of airborne clutter, drones, sensor errors. Its public briefings were sparse, careful, clinical, and then, almost casually, they admitted some incidents remain unexplained. Once again the cycle completed itself, disclosure spawning mystery, mystery demanding more disclosure. Every revelation recreates the conditions of belief. Philosophers see a pattern older than politics. When religion lost its monopoly on wonder, science inherited it. When science falters at the edges of comprehension, secrecy fills the vacuum. Even in an age of data, we require awe. Humanity cannot tolerate a silent sky. Standing in a reading room of declassified files, you can feel that paradox. Folders marked "Released under FOIA" line the shelves, each page both illumination and shadow. Black bars redact a word here, a paragraph there, creating visual poetry of absence. The gaps speak louder than the text. Perhaps both are right. Historians read them as the residue of caution. Dreamers read them as coordinates to truth. Yet for all our knowledge, we remain surrounded by mystery, the oceans unexplored, the brain unmapped, the universe unmeasured. Outside, satellites trace arcs invisible to the naked eye, their sensors open to every spectrum. The same technology that once hid now reveals, streaming high-resolution images of a world we still barely understand. Disclosure, like enlightenment, is perpetual. There is always more darkness beyond the candle's reach. The question, what did they hide, becomes secondary to why do we need them to hide it. When governments unseal their archives, what they release is not certainty, but narrative, the story of how humans confront the unknown. Secrecy defines identity as much as exposure does. The era of documents is ending, replaced by one of transparency, so total it becomes opaque. In every civilization, the hidden and the revealed dance in balance. Without one, the other loses meaning. Data floods every screen. Truth drowns in its reflection. The ancient impulse endures, to seek, to uncover, to believe that the next revelation will finally complete the picture. It never does. But the search itself is the inheritance. As midnight gathers over the archive, you close the last folder and realize disclosure was never the finale, it was the transition. For when humanity peers into its secrets, what it ultimately discovers is itself. The need to mythologize knowledge, to turn evidence into story. And that realization leads to the penultimate chapter of this chronicle, the mirror phase of mystery, where history and myth meet eye to eye. When the flood of documents and revelations finally slowed, humanity looked around and realized the mystery had not vanished, it had merely turned inward. For centuries, the unknown had lived in the stars, in oceans, in sealed archives. Now it lived in us. The age of reflection began not with discovery, but with saturation. the moment when information exceeded understanding. In museums and digital databases alike, the entire human story became accessible at a glance. Satellites mapped the ruins, once buried by sand. Genetics traced ancestry through every migration and myth. Yet the more we knew, the less the knowledge felt complete. The universe grew larger with every answer. Myth, far from fading, adapted. It became metaphor for the data itself. The gods of old now wore the faces of algorithms, omniscient yet unseen. Psychologists describe this paradox as cognitive vertigo, the dizziness of near total knowledge. When every mystery becomes a hyperlink, wonder mutates into fatigue. But culture responded in the oldest way possible. It told stories. Films, novels, and games resurrected the archetypes, the hidden architect, the chosen seeker, the revelation that dissolves certainty. Our myths reassembled themselves through new media, reminding us that belief is not ignorance, but orientation. To know where we stand, we still need shadows to measure light. History offers precedent. Each scientific revolution births its own mythology. Copernicus displaced Earth and inspired cosmic awe. Darwin revealed kinship with nature and rekindled creation myths in new form. Quantum physics replaced divine will with probability. The narrative never ends. It simply shifts vocabulary. What was once fate becomes physics. What was once prophecy becomes probability. Yet the human emotional response remains identical. Humility before complexity. Anthropologists see the 21st century as a second renaissance, a time when myth and measurement reconcile. Rituals persist, only renamed. The act of scrolling through endless data mimics prayer beads. Social media functions as communal altar and confessional. Our machines are mirrors, and in their reflections we rediscover the ancient shapes of faith, confession, judgment, redemption, through recognition. The divine has become participatory, but reflection can also distort. When myths return as entertainment, they lose weight. Conspiracies rise to fill the gap, offering simple cosmologies in place of nuance. The same psychological need that once built temples now builds echo chambers. Sociologists call it the myth of explanation, the comforting illusion that one grand narrative can order chaos. It is the modern form of creation story, except the gods are replaced by systems and secret elites. We build pantheons from algorithms and hierarchies from hashtags. The structure remains ancient, the costumes new. Even science, that supposed destroyer of myth, thrives on metaphor. Physicists speak of dark matter and singularities, poets of the same. Cosmology borrows the language of Genesis, creation, expansion, light from void, because at the threshold of understanding, imagination is the only instrument available. Where equations end, story begins. The two are not enemies, they are phases of the same human rhythm. In this age, the individual becomes both observer and participant. Every device records, every gesture leaves a trace. We are each archivists of our own existence, feeding an ever-growing chronicle that future historians will interpret as we interpret cave art. Privacy, the right to remain untold, has become the new frontier of mystery. To hide is now an act of resistance, an echo of the priest guarding sacred knowledge. The pendulum of secrecy and disclosure continues its swing. Art responds accordingly. Installations project the night sky onto ceilings, recreating ancient constellations with LEDs. Musicians sample cosmic noise, turning radio static into rhythm. Philosophers revisit hermetic axioms, as above, so below, as within, so without. These revivals are not nostalgia, they are recognition that progress and myth move in tandem. For every breakthrough, a reflection. For every revelation, a parable. If myth is mirror, then history is its frame. We peer into the reflection, not to escape truth, but to understand its shape. The stories of Atlantis, the pyramids, the machine gods, and the radio voices all converge here, not as evidence of conspiracy, but as testimony to continuity. They show that humans have always explained the world through narrative symmetry, the belief that what is lost will return, that every secret will find its disclosure, and that meaning lies just beyond the veil of comprehension. This awareness marks a quiet maturity. The modern seeker does not chase forbidden artifacts or hidden archives, but asks why the pursuit itself endures. In that self-awareness, myth transforms from illusion into instrument, a way to organize mystery without erasing it. Reflection replaces revelation. We are no longer waiting for the gods to speak. We are listening to our own echoes. Outside, night spreads across cities whose lights mimic constellations. For the first time in history, the Earth seen from orbit glows brighter than the sky above it. Humanity has become the visible star, and as we illuminate the planet, we rediscover an ancient humility. Light defines itself only through the darkness it cannot reach. The archive nears its end. Only one more section remains, a soft descent, a quiet after-image. It will close the circle where myth and evidence, secrecy and knowledge collapse into the same truth, that the search for mystery is the story. Every civilization buries something. Sometimes it is treasure, sometimes truth, more often fear. Across 5 millennia, the guardians of knowledge, scribes, priests, monarchs, scientists, corporations, have all learned the same lesson. Power is not only what you know, but what you can withhold. Yet history also shows that nothing stays hidden forever. Time itself is the great archaeologist. It exhumes what secrecy only delays. In ancient Egypt, literacy was the privilege of the few. Priests guarded the language of the gods, hieroglyphs, while commoners watched symbols they could not read, carve miracles into stone. Centuries later, when the Rosetta Stone surfaced, the code broke open. What had been divine secrecy became shared heritage. The same pattern unfolds endlessly: knowledge centralized, knowledge released, wonder reborn. Each generation calls its gatekeepers the elite, forgetting that tomorrow's discoverers will give them the same name. Medieval Europe repeated the cycle. Manuscripts chained in monasteries, guarded by vows, eventually escaped through the printing press. The machine of ink was as disruptive in its age as the microchip in ours. Suddenly, thought travelled faster than authority. Ideas once whispered in cloisters, flooded streets, shaping revolutions. Secrecy retreated but never vanished. It adapted. Censorship and classification are its modern vestments. Bureaucracy, its theology. Even science, champion of transparency, has its hidden chambers. Patents sealed for defense, research classified for advantage, algorithms locked behind corporate firewalls. Today's temples of knowledge are digital, their priests engineers. We call them innovators. Future historians will call them curators of power. Yet their control, like all before, will erode. Information leaks by nature. It seeks equilibrium. Every firewall eventually meets its Rosetta Stone. Still, there is truth in the idea of burial by design. Institutions conceal not always to deceive, but to preserve, waiting for context, for readiness, for profit, or for safety. The Dead Sea Scrolls lay hidden for 2 millennia, not by conspiracy, but by sand and time. The same applies to archives locked for 50 years, secrets deferred, not denied. But to the curious mind, delay feels like denial. Patience and suspicion share the same heartbeat. The phrase "buried by the elite" survives because it names a feeling, not a fact. the tension between those who know and those who wish to. In every era, curiosity becomes rebellion. When the forbidden text turns public, the forbidden tool becomes universal, and humanity advances one rung higher on its spiral. Progress is the art of collective trespass. Yet every unveiling carries its cost. Revelation breeds disillusion. The mysteries that once united us splinter into information. Awe turns analytical. Wonder becomes data. But from that dissection grows a deeper humility, the awareness that knowing everything is impossible and therefore sacred. Ignorance, in the philosophical sense, is not deficiency, but horizon. It is what keeps the human spirit moving forward. Consider how this chronicle began, with the monuments of antiquity and the myths of connection between earth and sky. Those same questions still hum beneath the surface of modern life. Who built? Why? For whom is knowledge reserved? Each answer only reframes the question. Perhaps the real continuity is not conspiracy, but curiosity, the refusal to stop asking. Look around the present. Satellites circling like guardian angels, data streams rising from cities like incense. Humanity has recreated the architecture of belief, using fiber optics instead of stone. Power still gathers at the summit. Corporations, states, information brokers, but below them billions of signals flow freely. The hierarchy persists, but the current escapes containment. Even the most guarded algorithm trembles under collective inquiry. The elite may bury, but time digs faster now. In this light, the word elite loses menace and gains irony. They are not villains but stewards, caught in the same cycle, holding knowledge until knowledge holds them. Each generation inherits secrets, refines them, and leaves its own buried layers for the next to unearth. History is not a straight road, but an archaeological site. Truths stacked atop one another, some eroded, some waiting, and at the center of that excavation stands you, the observer, sifting through fragments for coherence. Perhaps that is what endures beyond all conspiracies, the persistence of search. Civilizations rise, archives burn, but curiosity survives every empire. It is the only immortal faculty, the pulse that outlasts both revelation and repression. As long as questions exist, so will the unseen. The final irony is beautiful. In attempting to control knowledge, humanity has created a legacy too vast to contain. The libraries once built to guard understanding now overflow with digitized light. The Internet, our newest monument, reflects the same paradox as the pyramids, immense, mysterious, and destined to outlast its makers. We have become both builders and excavators of our own myth. And so the archive closes, not with certainty but with continuity. From ancient temples to secret domes, from stone inscriptions to quantum code, the pattern endures, knowledge concealed, revealed, reimagined. What was buried by time, by power, or by fear, eventually returns to the surface, altered, reframed, and newly sacred. The mystery remains not because it is unsolved, but because it is infinite. Take one last look at the trail behind you, 101 fragments of wonder, verified and debated, each a reflection of humanity's restless mind. Now the search passes to you. The next discovery may not lie in ruins or documents, but in perspective, in seeing that the world's secrets have always been mirrors. Time buries, curiosity exhumes, and the excavation never ends.